James Torres set Elijah's duffel bag on the front porch before Elijah understood he was being thrown out. It was raining on River Street, a thin October rain that darkened the porch boards and tapped against the aluminum awning. Elijah stood in the doorway of his grandfather's house with a ring of unfamiliar keys in one hand and a folded property sheet in the other. His father kept one palm against the door. "You've got somewhere to go," James said. Elijah looked past him into the house. Jack's brown work jacket still hung beside the basement door. His coffee mug sat upside down near the sink, because Brianna had washed it that morning and hadn't known where to put it. Nothing looked settled, though everyone had spent the afternoon deciding who would own what. "It doesn't have heat," Elijah said. James glanced toward the street. He was 50 years old then and already looked older around the eyes. Jack had been buried 8 days earlier. Grief had made James impatient with anything he couldn't repair quickly, and Elijah had become one of those things. "It has walls, some of them." "Elijah, I'm just saying what the inspection says." Brianna came down the hallway carrying a cardboard box marked "Office." At 24, she knew how to look busy when a conversation became ugly. She stopped when she saw the duffel on the porch. "Dad, it's raining. I can see that. He can stay tonight." James didn't turn around. "This house belongs to you now." "Do you want him staying?" Brianna tightened her arms around the box. She had received the house and enough of Jack's savings to cover the mortgage balance and repairs. She'd been talking all afternoon about paint colors, rental value, and what the neighborhood might look like in 5 years. She loved Elijah, in the vague way people loved someone they assumed would always be nearby. But the house was the first valuable thing anyone had trusted her with. "For tonight," she said, "then tomorrow becomes next week." Elijah waited for her to answer. She lowered the box onto the floor. "There's no reason to make this worse," she said. That was when Elijah understood she wasn't speaking to James. He looked down at the paper again. The former Huron Loop Tram Station, River Street, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Assessed value, $22,000. The next line listed delinquent maintenance, disconnected utilities, broken windows, roof deterioration, and possible water intrusion. His grandfather had left him a boarded station that hadn't served a tram since 2004. James had received Torres electrical repair, including its vans, customer accounts, shop equipment, and debts. Brianna had received the house and most of the remaining cash. Elijah had received the station, its fixtures, and whatever remained inside it. At first, he'd thought there must be another page. He'd gone through the packet twice at the dining room table. His name appeared only beside the station. Jack had signed the papers clearly. There was no mistake to correct and no missing envelope anyone had forgotten to open. James had watched him read. "Your grandfather always thought that place was special," he'd said. The words had sounded kind until James added, "He was wrong." Now Elijah put the property sheet into his jacket pocket. "Grandpa said I could live here while I finished training. You stopped going. I missed 2 classes when he got sick. You missed more than that. I was taking him to appointments." James's mouth moved, but no words came. He knew that part was true. He also knew who hadn't taken Jack to those appointments. Brianna stepped closer to the door. "Eli, nobody planned for this. Grandpa did. Not this part." She meant the porch. She meant the rain. She meant their father's hand against the door and Elijah's bag getting wet beside a flower pot Jack had forgotten to empty before winter. Elijah looked at James. "You knew the station was mine before today. I knew it was in the papers. And you didn't tell me? What would that have changed? I could have checked it. You can check it now." James reached into his pocket and brought out a small brass key. It was darker than the others on Elijah's new ring. Jack had kept it in the top drawer of his workbench, tied to a cardboard label with faded writing. "Station Front." James placed it in Elijah's palm. "The business is in trouble," he said quietly. "I don't have room for another expense." Elijah closed his fingers around the key. "I didn't ask you to pay for it. You will. Taxes, insurance, utilities. That building eats money. Your grandfather poured years into it, and it still looks condemned. Then why didn't he leave it to you?" Brianna whispered. "Eli?" James's face changed. It wasn't anger at first. It was the look of a son who had spent his life wanting an answer from his father and had just heard the question from someone else. Then the anger came. "Because he knew I had real responsibilities," James said. "He left you the thing nobody else could use." Elijah stood still. Jack had taught him to strip wire at the kitchen table, label every screw, and never force a switch that wouldn't move. James had taught him something too, though neither of them would have named it that night. He had taught Elijah how quickly help could be counted as debt. James pulled the door inward. "Go see what you inherited." The door shut before Elijah could decide whether to say goodbye. For a few seconds he watched their shapes move behind the front curtains. Brianna stayed near the entry. James walked toward the kitchen. Neither came back. Elijah put the duffel over his shoulder and started down River Street. The station was less than a mile away. He'd passed it hundreds of times without seeing more than the boarded windows and the weeds growing along the old track bed. Jack had sometimes slowed when they drove by. Once, when Elijah was about 12, he'd pointed through the windshield and said, "That place used to know where every car on the loop was." Elijah had asked how a building could know anything. Jack had smiled. "Wires tell the truth if you give them a complete path." At the time, Elijah had been more interested in the fries cooling in his lap. The rain grew heavier as he walked. Water worked through the shoulders of his jacket. His phone showed 9% battery and $34 in his checking account. He had no car. The old pickup he'd been using belonged to the repair business, and James had taken the key from him after the funeral. A city bus passed without stopping because Elijah wasn't near a marked stop. Its tires sprayed his jeans. He almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because getting angry at the bus felt easier than thinking about the house behind him. The Huron Loop station appeared beyond a chain-link fence near the river. It was a long brick building with a shallow roof and a narrow upper floor over one end. A rusted metal sign still hung above the entrance. Most of the letters were gone, though Huron could be read if someone already knew what it said. Elijah pushed through a bent gate. Wet weeds brushed his knees. The old platform ran along the back of the building, beside rails half buried in grass and gravel. One waiting room window was covered with plywood. Another had been cracked and patched from the inside with clear plastic that had turned yellow. The brass key fit the front door, but it wouldn't turn. Elijah tried it twice. Then he remembered Jack's rule and stopped forcing it. He leaned his shoulder against the door, lifted slightly on the handle, and turned the key again. The lock moved with a dry scrape. "That's one thing," he said. The tiny success warmed him more than it should have. He stepped inside and smelled wet plaster, old wood, mouse droppings, and cold brick. The waiting room held 3 benches bolted to the floor. A ticket window faced the entrance, its glass cloudy but unbroken. Leaves had blown beneath the door and gathered against the far wall. Elijah used the light on his phone. The ceiling had peeled in wide strips. Water stained one corner, but there was no puddle beneath it. An old radiator stood under the front window. Someone had removed its valve handle. A timetable case remained fixed to the wall, empty except for a dead moth and a torn strip of yellow paper. He locked the door behind him. The sound settled the first question. For that night, at least, no one could make him leave. A narrow hallway led past the ticket office to a utility room. The electrical panel had been disconnected, just as the inspection said. Several breakers were tagged in Jack's block handwriting. Waiting room, platform, upstairs, control. Elijah touched the last label. Beside the panel stood a tall gray cabinet with 2 doors and a round glass window. Inside were rows of old relays, cloth-covered wires, copper bars, and small white tags. The work was too clean to be original. Some wires looked ancient, but others had newer insulation. Jack had kept changing something after the station closed. A black metal bell hung high on the wall above the cabinet. It was about the size of a dinner plate, with a striker fixed beneath it. Elijah aimed the phone upward. Dust covered the bell evenly. No one had touched it in years. He didn't know what control meant. He didn't know why Jack had maintained dead railway equipment in a station with no electricity. Those questions would have to wait until morning, along with nearly everything else in his life. The upstairs door was swollen shut. Elijah worked it open with a flat screwdriver he found in a drawer behind the ticket counter. A steep wooden staircase rose into darkness. At the top were 2 small operators' rooms and a bathroom. One room contained a narrow iron bed frame without a mattress. The other held shelves, a scarred desk, and rolls of electrical drawings tied with string. A section of ceiling had fallen over the desk, covering everything in gray plaster dust. The bathroom faucet gave one cough when Elijah turned it. Nothing followed. He went back downstairs. His wet clothes had begun to chill him. He found an old push broom in the utility room and swept leaves away from the driest bench. A storage closet held a folded canvas drop cloth that smelled stale but wasn't damp. He shook it out, wiped the bench, and laid the canvas over the wood. His phone rang. Brianna's name appeared on the screen. Elijah watched it until the last second before answering. "Are you there?" she asked. "Yeah." "What's it like?" He looked across the dark waiting room. Rain tapped against the plywood window. The beam from his phone rested on the black bell. "Cold." "You can come back if Dad calms down." "Did he say that?" A pause answered him. Brianna lowered her voice. "I left some of your clothes in a trash bag by the garage. I didn't want them getting wet." "You put my clothes outside?" "I was trying to help." He sat on the bench. "Did you know?" "Know what?" "That Grandpa left me this place." "I knew he talked about it. I didn't know the final papers." That wasn't quite true. Brianna had seen a draft months earlier while helping Jack gather property records. She had closed the folder when she saw Elijah enter the room. She'd told herself it wasn't final, so it wasn't her news to share. Now she listened to him breathe. "Eli, the station isn't safe," she said. "The report says the wiring could be dangerous. There's no power. You know what I mean." "No, I don't. I mean, you shouldn't make some point by sleeping there." He looked at the locked front door. "I'm not making a point." "Then what are you doing?" He had no good answer. Going back would require James to open the door. It would require Brianna to say he belonged in a house she now considered hers. Elijah couldn't stand on that porch twice in one night. "I'm tired," he said. "I can call someone." "Who?" She was silent again. Elijah rubbed rainwater from his hair. "I'll get my clothes tomorrow. Dad's under pressure with the shop. He still put my bag outside." "I know. He did it before he told me to leave." "I know." That time, her voice changed. She had noticed the bag earlier. She simply hadn't stopped him. Elijah ended the call before his battery died. He placed the duffel beneath his head and pulled the canvas over himself. The bench was too short, so he bent his knees. Cold air moved under the doors. Somewhere inside the wall, water ticked into metal at uneven intervals. Sleep wouldn't come. He kept seeing Jack's work jacket by the basement door. He kept hearing his father say nobody else could use the station. Near midnight, Elijah got up and walked behind the ticket counter. He needed another layer, a newspaper, anything. The bottom drawer stuck halfway. He pulled gently, felt something catch, and reached behind it. His fingers closed around a small wooden handle. The drawer came free. Behind it was a hand-crank emergency lantern, dusty but intact. Elijah turned the crank until the resistance grew firm, then pressed the switch. A weak amber light filled the ticket office. On the inner wall, where darkness had hidden it before, Jack had mounted a simple board with hooks for station keys. Only one key remained. Beneath it, in Jack's careful handwriting, were two words: Night Access. Elijah lifted the key from its hook. Then he carried the lantern into the waiting room, set it on the floor beside his bench, and began checking every door the station had. The last one was at the rear of the utility room. The night access key opened it. Elijah had expected another closet. Instead, the door led outside beneath the platform canopy. He stepped onto wet concrete and raised the lantern. The old rails curved away through weeds. One line went west, toward downtown. The other bent behind warehouses and disappeared among trees beside the river. Jack had kept this door usable even after the public entrance began sticking. The hinges were greased. A rubber strip had been fitted along the bottom to keep out water. On the inside of the door, a metal notice read, "Authorized operators only." Elijah ran his thumb over the raised letters. When he was younger, Jack had sometimes left the house, after dinner, with a thermos and his tool case. James always called it station nonsense. Elijah had accepted that explanation because it was easier than asking why his grandfather kept going. He locked the rear door and returned to the bench. The lantern lasted nearly an hour. When it dimmed, Elijah cranked it again. That small circle of amber light stayed beside him until he finally slept. He woke with one foot numb and morning showing around the plywood window. A delivery truck was backing up somewhere nearby. Its warning signal came through the brick wall in steady beeps. For a few confused seconds, he thought he was in Jack's basement after falling asleep on the old sofa. Then he moved, and the bench reminded him. His jacket was still damp. His neck hurt. He sat up and checked his phone. The battery had died during the night. There was a public drinking fountain near the river path, so he washed his face there. The water was painfully cold. A man walking a dog glanced at him, and then at the station. Elijah pretended to be checking the lock. That bothered him more than the cold. He didn't want to look like someone who'd slept inside an abandoned building, even though that was exactly what he was. He walked back to Jack's house for his clothes. The trash bag waited beside the garage, tied at the top. Brianna's car was in the driveway. James's work van was gone. Elijah could have taken the bag and left. Instead, he knocked on the side door. Brianna opened it wearing Jack's old blue robe over her clothes. Seeing it on her made Elijah stop. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." She looked down and understood. "Mine's in the wash." "I didn't say anything." "You looked." She stepped aside, but not enough to invite him in. The kitchen behind her smelled like coffee and toast. Elijah could see Jack's chair at the table. Brianna had placed a stack of property brochures on it. "I need my charger," he said. "I put it in the bag. My work boots too. They're by the basement steps. Can I get them?" Brianna hesitated, then opened the door wider. Elijah walked in. The kitchen was warm enough to make his hands sting. A half-eaten piece of toast sat on a plate near the sink. He tried not to look hungry. Brianna noticed anyway. "There's bread," she said. "I'm fine. You don't have to do that." "Do what?" "Act like you can't eat because it's my bread now." He looked at her. "Is it?" She pressed her lips together. "You know what I mean." He didn't, but he took 2 slices from the bag. Brianna pushed the butter toward him without speaking. That was how things usually worked between them. She offered something small after staying quiet about something larger. Elijah accepted because refusing made him feel childish, and accepting let them both pretend the larger thing had been handled. He ate standing beside the counter. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Get the utilities checked. With what money? I'll work. For Dad." Elijah spread more butter onto the second slice. "If he pays me?" "He always pays you." "No, he gives me money. That's paying you, not when he feels like it." Brianna poured coffee into Jack's mug, then realized which one she'd taken. She set it down without drinking. "He covered your phone," she said. "He let you use the truck. The truck was for jobs. You used it other times. I took Grandpa to the clinic in it. I'm not keeping a list, Eli. It sounds like you are." She turned away and began wiping crumbs from a clean section of counter. Brianna didn't want to be cruel. She wanted the family to stay intact without anyone asking her to surrender the part that benefited her. She believed those were the same thing if everyone spoke gently enough. "Dad needs help at the shop today," she said. "Did he ask you to tell me?" "He didn't have to. The Van Buren job got moved up, and one of the guys called out." Elijah gave a short laugh. "What?" "He doesn't have room for my expense, but he has room for my labor. You know the shop's struggling." "I know." "Then why say it like that?" Because Elijah had spent years making himself useful before anyone asked. He swept the shop, loaded vans, answered calls, and finished small repairs. James didn't have time to finish. Whenever James handed him $40 or paid his phone bill, Elijah treated it as proof that he had a place there. He had never asked for regular hours. He had never asked what his work was worth. Asking might have produced an answer he didn't want. "I need my boots," he said. He found them beside the basement stairs, along with a red plastic toolbox. The box belonged to him. Jack had given it to him after Elijah completed his first clean panel replacement. When he lifted it, Brianna said, "Dad might need those." "They're my tools. I meant today." "So do I." She followed him to the door. "Are you going to the shop? I'm going to charge my phone. You can do that here." Elijah looked at the kitchen, the robe, the property brochures, and Jack's chair being used as a table. "No," he said. "I can't." He took the trash bag and toolbox back to the station. In daylight, the place looked worse. A section of gutter had pulled away above the platform. Water ran down the brick and entered through a cracked mortar joint near the upstairs rooms. Elijah carried his tools up and found damp plaster beneath the window. The leak hadn't caused the fallen ceiling over the desk. That water stain came from farther inside, below a roof drain. He climbed through a narrow hatch at the top of the stairs. The roof was nearly flat and covered with black membrane patched in several shades. Leaves had gathered around a metal drain near the center. Elijah used gloved hands to pull out a packed mass of leaves, seed pods, and mud. Water rushed down with a hollow gulp. The puddle around his boots began to fall. He stayed there until he could see the drain cover. Then he pushed loose membrane flat and weighted it with 2 bricks. It wasn't a repair, but it would keep the next rain from sending so much water inside. From the roof, he could see Jack's house beyond the warehouses. The repair shop sat farther east, hidden behind a line of maples. Elijah had always thought those places formed one life. The house was where he slept. The shop was where he worked. The station was where Jack disappeared when the rest of them had stopped listening to him. Now, the station was the only one Elijah could enter without permission. He climbed down and moved the rolls of drawings away from the wet plaster. Under them, he found an old enamel sign. Huron Loop staff must report all signal faults. The word all had been underlined in black marker. On the back, Jack had written a date and 3 initials. Elijah recognized JT. The other 2 meant nothing to him. He set the sign on the desk and plugged his charger into a portable battery from his toolbox. It held just enough power to start his phone. 7 missed calls appeared. 5 were from James. 2 were from a number Elijah recognized as the repair shop. He called his father. "You have the south van key?" James asked without saying hello. "No, it's not on the board. You took it from me." A pause followed. "Right," James said. "Did you leave your meter in the van?" "It's in my toolbox. I need it for the Van Buren job. It was Grandpa's. It's shop equipment. He gave it to me. Bring it over, and we'll sort that out later." Elijah looked at the red toolbox. "Do you want the meter, or do you want me to do the job?" James exhaled through his nose. "I want to get through one morning without an argument. So do I. The customer's losing power in half the building. It's probably a loose service connection. You know the old panel there?" Elijah did know it. He had found the heat-damaged lug during a maintenance visit 2 months earlier and told James it needed replacement. James had postponed the work because the customer wanted a cheaper temporary fix. "Did you replace that lug?" Elijah asked. "It held." "That's not what I asked. Bring the meter." Elijah nearly said yes. The answer sat ready in him, shaped by years of habit. James needed help. Elijah knew how to help. If he went, the morning would feel normal again. He looked at the station ceiling, the wet desk, and the dead electrical panel. "I'll bring it if you sign it out," he said. "What?" "Write that it belongs to me, and the shop borrowed it. Don't be ridiculous. Then use another meter." The silence lasted long enough for Elijah to hear a van door slam on James's end. "I taught you that work," James said. "Grandpa did." James ended the call. Elijah stood behind the ticket counter with the phone still against his ear. His hand shook, though the conversation had been quiet. He hadn't won anything. The shop owned other meters. James would finish the job without him. Elijah had simply made himself less convenient. Still, the red toolbox remained at his feet. He carried it into the utility room and examined the disconnected panel. The service cable had been cut outside. Restoring power would require an inspection, a permit, and money he didn't have. The station's internal wiring would need to be tested before anyone agreed to energize it. He wrote the first useful list of his new life on the back of an old timetable. Secure broken window, stop roof leak, find water shutoff, electrical inspection, work, food. He added mattress, then crossed it out. Food came first. A knock sounded at the front door. James stood outside in his work jacket. He had driven over in the north van. Elijah could see another meter on the passenger seat. He opened the door but kept one hand on it. James looked past him into the waiting room. His eyes moved across the benches, the canvas drop cloth, and the duffel bag. "You really stayed here." Elijah waited. James held out a paper cup of coffee and a breakfast sandwich wrapped in foil. "I was already stopping," he said. Elijah accepted them. The cup was hot against his fingers. His father glanced toward the utility room hall. "Where's the meter?" "In my box. I won't take it." "Okay." James shifted his weight. He wasn't used to visiting Elijah anywhere. At Jack's house, James had entered rooms without knocking. At the shop, he had assigned work without asking. Even in the old pickup, he changed the radio station from the passenger seat. Here, he stood outside. "You can come help after you eat," James said. "I'll give you 100 for the Van Buren job, for the day." "How many hours?" James frowned. "Until we're done. I need to work on this place. That place won't pay you. Neither did yesterday." James looked toward the street. He had come intending to restore the familiar arrangement. Food, a little money, a task, and no discussion of what Elijah's role actually was. Elijah knew that arrangement. Part of him still wanted it. "What if I come for 4 hours?" he asked. $100. "You write it down. I'm not borrowing the van, and you're not covering my phone. It's work." James stared at him as if he'd begun speaking a language they both understood but had never used together. Then he nodded once. 4 hours. Elijah stepped back to get his jacket. Before leaving, he locked the front door and tested it twice. James waited on the platform while Elijah went through the utility room and checked the night access door too. When Elijah returned, his father was studying the old rails. "Grandpa kept a key for that door," Elijah said. James looked at him. "He kept keys for everything. Did you ever come here with him?" "Once or twice." "What was he doing?" James turned toward the van, making sure dead things stayed dead. Elijah knew his father well enough to hear the lie. He also knew himself well enough to recognize what he did next. He followed James to the van, but he carried his toolbox on his own lap, watched the time from the moment they left, and left the station keys in nobody's hand but his. The first hour at the Van Buren building went exactly as Elijah expected. The loose connection had overheated, the insulation around one conductor had turned brown, and the metal lug was scarred where it had been arcing. James stood beside the open panel with his jaw tight while Elijah aimed a work light inside. "It held," Elijah said. "Don't start." "I'm not starting anything. We need to replace it. The supply house doesn't have that lug. They had it 2 months ago. They don't now." Elijah looked at him. "Did you call?" James picked up his phone. The customer, who ran a small furniture warehouse, kept appearing in the doorway to ask when the lights would be back. James gave a different estimate each time. Elijah removed the damaged part, cleaned the connection point, and prepared the conductors while his father drove to the supply house. The replacement fit. By the end of the 4th hour, the panel was closed, the lights were steady, and James had stopped pretending the temporary repair had been good enough. Elijah washed his hands in a utility sink and checked the time. "I'm done," he said. "We've got one more call. I said 4 hours. You're already here. And now, I'm leaving." James stared at him. A week earlier, that look would have kept Elijah in the van until dark. Then James took out his wallet. He counted 5 $20 bills and held them out. Elijah accepted the money. "Write it down," he said. James gave a tired shake of his head, but he took a job envelope from the van and wrote Elijah's name, the date, 4 hours, and $100. He tore off the yellow copy. "There. Official enough?" Elijah folded it into his pocket. James drove him back without speaking. At the station, Elijah lifted his toolbox from the van. "Call if you want more hours," James said. "At that rate, we'll talk about it. That's not a rate." James gripped the steering wheel. "You've been paid 1 day, and now you're negotiating like a contractor. I worked 1 day like one." Elijah shut the van door before the conversation could become the reason he stayed. He spent $30 on a used camping pad from a resale shop. Another 12 bought a roll of plastic, a box of screws, and cheap weather stripping. He bought bread, canned soup, peanut butter, and instant coffee. The remaining money went into an envelope inside his toolbox. For the next 6 days, he worked on keeping weather out. He screwed plastic over the cracked window from inside. He cleaned the roof drain again and patched the loose membrane with material left in a storage cabinet. He found the water shut off in a concrete box beside the platform. The valve was closed, and the pipe beyond it had split where it entered the wall. That answered one question and created another. Water service would be useless until the pipe was repaired. At night, he slept upstairs on the camping pad. The operator's room was colder than the waiting room, but it had a door. He cleared the fallen plaster from the desk and arranged his clothes on one shelf. The room began to look occupied before it looked livable. James called twice with work. The first time, he offered 4 hours at the same pay. The second time, he offered a full day and wrote down the hours before Elijah arrived. Neither of them mentioned the porch. Brianna came on Sunday with a laundry basket. "I brought towels," she said. Elijah opened the front door and looked into the basket. Beneath the towels were 2 plates, a saucepan, soap, toilet paper, and Jack's old electric kettle. "There's no electricity." "I know, it's for later." She stepped into the waiting room without asking. Elijah noticed, but he didn't stop her. He wasn't ready to become someone who made his sister stand outside. Brianna looked around. The leaves were gone. The benches had been washed. Clear plastic covered the broken window, and the worst section of peeling ceiling had been scraped away. "You did all this?" "Some of it." "It smells better." "That's because I found the dead mouse." She made a face. "You could have left that part out." He carried the basket upstairs. Brianna followed and stood in the operator's room. The camping pad lay beneath 2 blankets. Elijah had placed the emergency lantern on the desk beside the enamel signal fault sign. The sign was cleaner now. The initials on the back read JT, MW, and LM. Brianna picked it up. Did Grandpa write this? His initials are there. Who are the others? I don't know. She turned the sign over. This could be worth something. It's a station sign. Old railway things sell. Elijah took it from her and placed it back on the desk. It stays here. I was only saying. Everything doesn't have to turn into a listing. Brianna's expression tightened. And everything I say isn't about money. He waited. She looked through the doorway at the bare second room. The house needs work. I was thinking I could sell in spring. You've had it a week. That's when you're supposed to make decisions before you get attached. Grandpa was attached, and look what happened. The words came out too quickly. Brianna wished she could take them back, but not enough to explain what she meant. Elijah folded one of the towels. Did you ever come here with him? He asked. No. Did you see papers about it? She leaned against the doorframe. Why do you keep asking me that? Because you knew more than you said. I saw a property list. When? A few months before he died. Elijah stopped folding. You told me you didn't know the final papers. I didn't. It was a draft. Was the station next to my name? Brianna looked at the floor. That was the small truth he'd wanted, and it hurt in a way he hadn't expected. She'd had time to ask Jack why. She'd had time to warn Elijah that his life might change. She had done neither because the draft gave her the house. I didn't think he'd go through with it, she said, but you thought he might. Eli, he was sick. He changed things all the time. Did he change your part? No. Dad's? No. She crossed her arms. What do you want me to say? The truth before I have to pull it out of you. Brianna walked downstairs. Elijah assumed she was leaving, but she stopped near the front door. The station was always next to your name, she said. Every version I saw. Then she left the laundry basket and went home. Elijah locked the door behind her. He stood in the quiet waiting room until anger stopped telling him what to do. Then he carried the enamel sign to the ticket counter and searched the initials on his phone. There were too many results for LM. The other set was easier. Morgan Woods appeared on the website of the Huron Loop Cooperative, a small group seeking grants and local support to restore part of the old route. Her photograph showed a woman in a safety vest, standing beside a battered yellow inspection car. Under her name were the words, Director and Electrical Systems Lead. Elijah called the number. A woman answered on the 4th ring, Huron Loop Cooperative. Is this Morgan Woods? Who's asking? My name is Elijah Torres. The line went quiet. Jack's grandson? She said. Yes. How's Jack? Elijah looked toward the gray control cabinet. He died. Morgan didn't speak for several seconds. When? Last week. No one told me. Elijah hadn't expected guilt to rise in him, but it did. Jack had known this woman well enough to mark equipment with her initials, and nobody in the family had called her. I'm sorry, he said. So am I. He heard a chair move on her end. What do you need, Elijah? I'm at the station. What do you mean at the station? I own it. Morgan gave one quiet breath that might have been surprise. He did it then. Did what? Another pause. Kept it separate. Separate from what? You'd better tell me why you called. Elijah looked at the list on the old timetable. Electrical inspection was still there. I need legal power, he said. The service was cut. I found your initials on a signal fault sign, and the control cabinet has newer work mixed with the old wiring. Have you opened that cabinet? Yes. Have you touched anything inside? No, keep it that way. Her answer came so quickly that Elijah stepped away from the cabinet. Is it dangerous? Anything can be dangerous if you don't know its condition. That isn't an answer. It's the answer you get over the phone. Morgan asked for the address, though she clearly remembered it. She agreed to come the next morning. Her inspection fee was more than Elijah had in his envelope, but when he said so, she told him he could provide labor on 2 cooperative maintenance days to cover the difference. That doesn't include repairs, she said. It gets you an honest list. I can work with a list. We'll see. Morgan arrived at 8 in a green pickup with a dented tailgate. She was 39 then, with gray beginning at one temple and a canvas tool bag that looked heavier than Elijah's. She stopped beneath the Huron sign and studied the building before looking at him. You have Jack's eyes, she said. Elijah had heard that at the funeral, from people who couldn't think of anything else to offer. Morgan seemed to regret saying it too. "Show me the service," she said. They began outside. Morgan checked the cut cable, the meter base, and the grounding connection. Inside, she removed the panel cover and tested every accessible conductor before letting Elijah hold the light. "Your grandfather changed this panel after the route closed," she said. "How can you tell?" "I helped him do it." Elijah looked at her. Morgan pointed to a neat row of handwritten labels. "Mine used to be crooked. He made me redo all of them. Why keep wiring a closed station? He said buildings fail all at once when people stop checking them. That sounds like him." It was annoying then too. They worked through the morning. The waiting room outlets had cracked insulation and needed replacement. The upstairs circuit was usable but lacked protection near the bathroom. Water damage had reached one ceiling box. Morgan marked each unsafe branch with blue tape. When they reached the utility room, she stood in front of the gray cabinet without opening it. "The public panel should be separate from this," she said. "Should be? Jack and I isolated the original signal equipment years ago. He wanted ordinary station power without anyone accidentally feeding the track circuit." Elijah pointed to a metal conduit entering the side of the cabinet. "That comes from the new panel." Morgan crouched and wiped dust from it. The conduit passed behind the wall, then returned through a junction box beneath the breakers. It looked like a connection, but when Morgan tested it, she found no direct electrical path. "Then what is it?" Elijah asked. "I don't know yet." That answer bothered her. Elijah could see it. Over the next 2 weeks, he replaced outlets under Morgan's supervision, repaired the damaged ceiling box, and installed the required protection upstairs. He worked 2 Saturdays for the cooperative, clearing brush from the old track and repairing the roof of a storage shed. In return, Morgan filed the service work properly and returned for the final checks. The utility restored the meter on a Thursday afternoon. A worker locked the meter ring, gave Elijah a short safety notice, and left. Morgan stood at the panel. Elijah waited in the hallway where she could see him. "Main breaker," she said. He switched it on. Nothing sparked, nothing smoked. Morgan turned on the waiting room branch. One overhead fixture flickered, then filled the room with flat white light. Elijah walked beneath it and looked up. For the first time since he'd inherited the station, he could see the whole waiting room at once. The clean benches looked almost good. The ceiling looked terrible. Dust-covered places he hadn't known were dirty. It was still the best thing he'd seen all month. Upstairs, the electric kettle worked. Elijah laughed when it clicked off, and Morgan accepted a cup of instant coffee without pretending it tasted good. They were carrying their cups back toward the panel when something moved inside the gray cabinet. It wasn't the bell. One relay arm drew inward with a soft metallic snap. A small amber indicator glowed, went dark, then glowed again. Morgan set her cup down. The light returned at the same interval, faint but steady, as if some distant part of the station had begun sending a pulse. "That circuit is isolated," she said. Elijah watched the relay move again. Then, "What's reaching it?" Morgan opened her tool bag. "That," she said, "is the next list." Morgan's list began with one instruction. "Don't touch the main breaker." She switched off the control branch, and the amber light died. The waiting room lights stayed on. "That's good," Elijah said. "It's better than the alternative." "What was the alternative?" "That your grandfather tied railway equipment into a public circuit with no protection. He didn't." Morgan looked at him. "You've owned the building for a month. Don't defend work you haven't traced." The words stung because they were fair. They removed the lower panel from the gray cabinet. Behind it sat a small transformer, 2 fuses, and a timer module mounted on a steel plate. The timer looked newer than the relays above it. Its wires entered a conduit running beneath the floor. Morgan photographed the arrangement before touching anything. "Did you install that with him?" Elijah asked. "No. Do you recognize it?" "The parts, yes. The purpose, not yet." She tested the transformer, then the timer. With the control branch off, both were dead. She checked resistance across the outgoing conductors and watched the reading settle. "That shouldn't happen," she said. "What?" "I'm getting a path." "To where?" "The track circuit, unless Jack changed the route." Elijah looked toward the rear platform. Grass had grown between the rails. Small trees stood farther down the line. Those tracks haven't been used since the loop closed. A circuit doesn't care whether passengers buy tickets. Morgan removed one fuse from the holder and placed it in a small envelope. She wrote the cabinet number and date across the front. Now the branch can be turned on without feeding this section, she said. Will the lights work? Yes. The upstairs outlets? Yes. The bell? No. Elijah glanced at the black bell. I wasn't planning to use it. Good. Keep not planning. She restored the breaker. The station lights came on, but the relay remained still. Morgan crouched beside the open cabinet again. Jack built a low-voltage feed into the control system. That pulse came through this timer and went somewhere under the floor. It returned strongly enough to move the relay. So the circuit works. No. Part of it did something. That sounds like the careful version of works. It's the careful version of not setting your building on fire. Elijah leaned against the utility room wall. Why would he hide it? He didn't hide this part. He labeled the breaker. He didn't tell anyone. That isn't the same thing. Morgan began drawing the circuit on a blank sheet from her clipboard. She marked the transformer, timer, relay, and 2 conductors leaving toward the platform. Elijah watched her hand. You knew he kept coming here. Yes. My dad said he was making sure dead things stayed dead. Morgan stopped drawing. James never liked the station. That doesn't answer me. No, it doesn't. She finished the line and capped her pen. Jack asked me to help isolate the public wiring after the route closed. We did that. Then my work changed, and I left Torres Electrical. Your grandfather kept maintaining the building. Maintaining this system? I knew he checked it. I didn't know he'd added the timer. Why didn't you ask? Morgan looked at the cabinet, not Elijah. Because I was busy. Because he could make a simple question last 3 hours. Because I thought there'd be more time. That answer, he understood. They followed the conduit into the waiting room. It disappeared beneath the ticket counter, where the floor was covered with square brown tiles. Most were worn, but none had been lifted. Morgan tapped each tile with the handle of her screwdriver. The sound stayed solid. Could run beneath the slab, she said. Then why does the conduit come this way? Old stations put signal instruments near the ticket office. There may have been another cabinet. Elijah opened every drawer behind the counter. He removed the bottom drawer again and showed her where he'd found the lantern. The space behind it was shallow. No wires entered there. Morgan examined the woodwork below the ticket window. One section had been painted the same dark green as the rest, but its screws were newer. Jack had filled the heads with paint. You have a utility knife? She asked. Elijah handed her one. She cut around the edges, then scraped paint from the screws. Elijah removed them carefully and put them in a cup. The panel resisted until he slid a thin putty knife along one side. Air moved through the gap. They pulled the panel forward. Behind it was a narrow cavity running beneath the ticket counter. 2 signal wires passed through ceramic supports along the back wall. Between them sat a metal document box wrapped in clear plastic. Elijah reached for it. Morgan caught his wrist. Photograph it first. It's a box. In a cavity connected to electrical equipment you inherited. Take the picture. He used his phone. Only then did they lift the box out. The metal had rusted around one corner, but the lid opened. Inside were 3 rolled diagrams, a bundle of inspection tags, and a black maintenance log with Huron loop control written across the cover in white pencil. Elijah touched the lettering. That's his writing. Morgan nodded. The first pages began shortly after the loop closed. Each entry had a date, weather conditions, test readings, and Jack's initials. Some included MWA third set, LM, appeared beside notes about dispatch checks. Elijah turned pages slowly. Jack had replaced corroded connections, cleaned relay contacts, tested underground conductors, and recorded failures after storms. The work continued year after year. He wasn't just checking the building, Elijah said. No. Morgan sounded unsettled now. What was he doing? Preserving continuity. Meaning what? Keeping an electrical path through the old block. That still doesn't tell me why. A block signal tells an operator whether a section of track is clear. On a simple circuit, the rails are part of the path. A car enters the section and changes what the relay sees. Elijah looked toward the platform again. There haven't been cars. There have been maintenance vehicles on other sections. Here? Not with my approval. He returned to the log. The ordinary entries were easy to follow. Cleaned cabinet, replaced fuse, water at East Junction, tested insulation after rain. Then the language became shorter. Night continuity held. West limit returned. Bell isolated during daytime check. LM witnessed full path. One entry appeared several times with changing readings beside it. After dark block test incomplete. No approved car. The final pages were from the year Jack died. His handwriting had grown less even, but the measurements remained neatly aligned. On one page, he'd drawn a box around a sentence. Night test required. One car on West Block. Confirm single bell, then clear. Elijah read it twice. Is that what the timer does? Maybe. What would ring the bell? I'm not guessing. You've guessed about everything else. No, I've identified components. That's different. Morgan took the log and checked the date. This entry is from 3 months before he died. So he was still testing it. He was still trying to. The distinction mattered. Elijah didn't yet know how. He turned to the back of the log. Several pages had been removed cleanly at the binding. No torn edges remained. Did he do that? I don't know. Would those pages explain it? I don't know that either. Morgan placed the log on the counter and opened one of the diagrams. It showed the station, a section of track, the platform cabinet, and a line extending west. Jack had marked one point with LM and a telephone number. Elijah compared the initials to the enamel sign upstairs. Who is LM? Lily Moran, the dispatcher? You know her? Grandpa mentioned a Lily. Morgan gave him the telephone number from the drawing. She ran the Huron Loop control desk before it closed. If Jack tested anything after I left, she may have been here. Elijah entered the number in his phone, but didn't call yet. What does this mean for the cooperative? He asked. Morgan began rolling the diagram. It means nothing until the system is tested. You're trying to bring the route back. We're trying to find out whether bringing part of it back is possible. And a working control system helps. A verified control point might help. The word might land it harder than Elijah expected. He had found the log. He had seen the relay move. Morgan had traced a real electrical path toward the rails. For several minutes, the station had seemed to contain an answer. Now it contained work. What would verification take? He asked. A proper inspection, track access, an approved vehicle, an engineer who will sign the result, insurance, coordination with the property holders along the line. That sounds expensive. It is. Can your cooperative do it? Not because an old relay moved once. Elijah folded his arms. Then what proof do you need before you'll look for proof? Morgan met his eyes. History first. We establish what Jack built, when he built it, and whether anyone witnessed it operating. Then I decide whether I can take it to the board. You decide? I'm responsible when volunteers go onto old track. I'm responsible when money gets spent. I liked your grandfather, but that doesn't turn his notes into a safe system. Elijah looked down at the maintenance log. For the last month, every useful thing had asked something from him. The roof drain gave him a dry ceiling, but required a real patch. Power gave him light, but exposed the control circuit. The log explained the pulse, but placed a retired dispatcher between him and the next answer. Still, the station no longer felt like a random burden Jack had pushed onto the youngest person in the family. Jack had worked here until near the end of his life. He had left records inside the building. He had placed Elijah's name beside the station on every draft Brianna saw. That didn't explain why. It did make walking away feel different. Can I run the public circuits? Elijah asked. Yes, with the control fuse removed. I'll make a lockout tag. And the cabinet. Dry it. Keep it locked. Don't clean relay contacts. Don't replace wire. Don't let anyone remove a part. Elijah thought of Brianna saying old railway things could sell. I won't. Morgan wrote the warning on a red tag and fastened it inside the cabinet. Then she helped Elijah return the documents to the metal box. He kept the maintenance log out. Not upstairs, she said. That roof still leaks. He placed it in the locked drawer behind the ticket counter. Morgan packed her tools but didn't leave. She walked into the waiting room and looked at the ceiling lights. You did good work here, she said. It was the first time anyone with Jack's training had said that since he died. Elijah picked up her empty coffee cup. The ceiling still looks terrible. It does. He smiled despite himself. Before Morgan left, she stood beside her truck and pointed toward the rear platform. If Lily confirms those entries, call me before you call anyone else. Who would I call? Your family, for one. They don't care about this place. Morgan looked at the station, the restored lights visible through the patched window. They don't care while they think it has no use. That evening, Elijah repaired the loose edge of the ticket counter panel and fitted a small lock so the cavity couldn't be opened from the waiting room. He moved his camping pad away from the damp wall upstairs. Then he heated soup in Brianna's saucepan on a single electric burner. After eating, he carried the maintenance log to the desk. He read until the entries blurred. Jack's measurements changed after rain and cold. Certain faults returned each winter. Lily's initials appeared beside 3 nighttime checks, including one performed years after the final passenger tram. Elijah picked up his phone. Before he could enter Lily's number, headlights swept across the waiting room ceiling. A car stopped outside. Brianna came to the front door holding a folder against her coat. She looked through the glass at the working lights, then at the Huron Loop Cooperative truck tracks still visible in the wet ground. When Elijah opened the door, she didn't mention the folder. "Who was here?" she asked. Elijah kept one hand on the door. "Someone who knew Grandpa's work." Brianna looked past him toward the utility room hall. What did they find? Elijah considered telling her nothing. The maintenance log was locked behind the ticket counter. Morgan had taken the fuse. Brianna couldn't have known more than what she saw through the window. Then he noticed the folder in her hands had his name written across it. "What did you bring?" he asked. "Mail from the house." "That's still my mailing address." "I know." She held the folder out but didn't release it immediately. "What did they find?" she asked again. "Old wiring. There was already old wiring. This is part of the signal system." Her grip loosened and Elijah took the folder. Inside was a notice from the insurance company. The temporary coverage on the station would end unless he submitted proof that the electrical work and broken window had been addressed. A second page requested photographs of the roof and the upstairs rooms. He read the pages while Brianna watched him. "Did Dad open this?" "No. Did you?" The envelope was already open. "Brianna." It came with estate mail. "I thought it was about the house." He folded the notice along its original crease. "The next one stays closed." "Fine." She tried to look into the hall again. "What kind of signal system?" "I don't know yet." "Then, what was that woman doing here all day? Making the power safe. You paid her?" "With work." Brianna stepped closer to the glass ticket window. "Is anything valuable in there?" Elijah thought about the log. "There's nothing for sale." "I didn't ask that." "You were going to." She looked offended, mostly because he was right. "I'm trying to understand why Grandpa kept all this," she said. "If there's equipment from the business, Dad needs to know. The business didn't inherit the station. Equipment can be separate from a building. So can a house. You still got everything inside yours. That isn't the same." "Why?" "Because people live in houses." Elijah looked at the camping supplies behind the ticket counter. Brianna followed his eyes and softened. "You know what I meant." "I do." He opened the door wider and stepped aside. "You can see the waiting room, not the utility room. Not upstairs unless you ask." She stared at him. "You're giving me rules? I'm telling you where you can go. I brought you towels, and I thanked you." "You didn't." "Thank you." The words did nothing to improve her expression. Still, she entered and stayed in the waiting room. That was new. Elijah had set a boundary, and Brianna had obeyed it, though she wanted him to feel unreasonable for needing one. She walked beneath the working ceiling lights. "It does look different," she said. "The power helps." "What are you going to do about the insurance?" "Send the electrical report. Finish the window. Photograph the roof. That roof isn't fixed. It's dry. That's not the same." Elijah almost smiled. "It's the careful version of fixed." Brianna didn't understand the reference. She left after a few minutes. At the door, she turned back. "Are you going to tell Dad about the signal thing?" "When I know what it is." "He's going to hear about it from me," I figured. The door closed behind her. Elijah called Lily before Brianna reached her car. A woman answered with a firm, "Hello," as if she expected the caller to explain himself quickly. "My name is Elijah Torres. Morgan Woods gave me your number." "Which Torres?" "Jack's grandson." Lily's voice changed. "The young one." "I'm 19. That's young to me." Elijah sat behind the ticket counter. "I found your initials in a maintenance log." "Where did you find the log?" "In the station. That's where Jack said he'd keep it." "You knew about it?" "I signed it." "Can you tell me what the entries mean?" Lily didn't answer at once. "Do you own the station?" she asked. "It was left to me." "That wasn't my question." Elijah opened the folder from the estate and found the property sheet. "The deed has my name. Do you have the key?" "Which key?" "The rear operator's door." He looked toward the utility room hall. Yes. Then meet me there tomorrow morning. She ended the call without giving him a chance to suggest a time. Lily arrived shortly after 7, carrying a metal thermos and a flashlight with tape around the handle. Her white hair was cut close around her ears. She wore a heavy brown coat, even though the morning was mild. Elijah opened the front door. She looked at him, then at the lock. "You lifted the handle when you turned the key," she said. "I had to. Jack never fixed that. He fixed the rear door. He cared more about operators getting in than customers." Lily entered the waiting room and stopped. For a moment, she said nothing. Her eyes moved from the ticket window to the benches and then to the timetable case on the wall. "They took the clock," she said. "Who?" "I don't know. It was gone the last time I came." "When was that?" "Before Jack got sick." She placed her thermos on the ticket counter. "Show me the log." Elijah unlocked the drawer and set the black book in front of her. Lily didn't open it immediately. She rested one hand on the cover. "He asked me to keep a second copy," she said. "Did you?" "For a while." Then he said, "This was enough." Why did he keep testing a closed route? Because closed and abandoned aren't the same thing. That sounds like something Grandpa would say. It was something I said. He stole it. She opened the log and turned directly to the later entries. Her finger paused beside her initials. "I was here for this one." "What did you test?" "Continuity from the station to the west limit." "How?" "With a portable shunt and a meter, no vehicle." Jack wanted to know whether the rails still carried a reliable path after storms. "What's a shunt?" "A connection across the rails. A tram's wheels do the same job when it enters the block." Elijah brought Morgan's circuit drawing from the cavity. Lily spread it on the counter and tapped the line extending west. "The block begins beyond the platform switch and ends before the river crossing. Jack rebuilt the feed from this station after the old control building was demolished." "Rebuilt it when?" "After the loop closed." Elijah leaned over the drawing. "So the station wasn't always the control point, not the only one. It became the only one left." That was the useful answer Morgan hadn't been able to give him. Elijah looked toward the gray cabinet. "Did it work?" "The continuity checks worked. The log says one car on the west block. Confirms single bell." Lily closed the book halfway. "That was Jack's full test." "Did you see him do it?" "No." "But you signed nighttime checks. I saw the circuit return at night. I saw the relay respond to a portable shunt. The bell was isolated. Why? Noise complaints for one. Also, Jack wouldn't ring an operator warning without a real vehicle on the block. He was particular about what a test proved." Elijah felt the answer narrow around another missing piece. "So nobody heard the bell. Not after the system was rebuilt. Then how do you know it would ring once?" "I don't." Jack believed it would. Lily rolled the diagram and walked toward the utility room. Elijah moved ahead of her. "The cabinet's locked out," he said. Morgan took the fuse. "Good." He opened the rear door with the night access key. Lily watched the key turn. "Jack gave you that?" "I found it behind the ticket drawer. He kept it hidden after copper started disappearing from empty buildings." They stepped onto the platform. Lily walked west beside the old rails, moving carefully where weeds covered broken concrete. About 30 yards from the station, she stopped near a low metal housing partly hidden by vines. "There," she said. Elijah had cleared brush along the platform, but hadn't noticed the housing. Its lid was held by 2 rusted latches. Lily gave him her flashlight. "Don't pull the vines. Cut them. The roots will bring water in around the conduit." Elijah returned for hand cutters. He trimmed the vines, cleared mud from the base, and worked penetrating oil into the latches. One opened, the other wouldn't move. He wanted to force it. Instead, he cleaned it again and waited. On the second attempt, it lifted. Lily nodded once. Inside were terminal posts, a ceramic block, and 2 thick wires descending toward the rails. Everything was dirty, but nothing had been stripped. "Copper thieves missed it," Elijah said. Jack painted the housing to look worse than it was. Lily showed him where a portable meter would connect. Elijah fetched his own. With the control fuse removed, they couldn't energize the circuit. They could still test the path at low meter voltage. Lily had him disconnect one lead, measure the open line, reconnect it, and compare the reading. The second reading held steady. "Is that good?" he asked. "It means the path Jack marked still exists from here back to the cabinet. After all this time?" "Apparently." Lily made him repeat the test before she signed the date in the maintenance log. Below her signature, she wrote, West Platform return confirmed at test housing. Full block, not verified. The result was real and incomplete, exactly the kind Jack had respected. Back inside, Lily drank coffee from her thermos while Elijah called Morgan. He explained the housing, the readings, and Lily's entry. Morgan asked to speak with her. Elijah handed over the phone. You still making people redo crooked labels? Lily asked. Morgan's reply was too faint for Elijah to hear. You should, Lily said. They look terrible. She listened, then glanced toward Elijah. No, I didn't energize it. I'm retired, not foolish. After another minute, Lily returned the phone. Morgan's voice came quickly. Photograph the new entry and send it to me. Elijah did. What happens now? He asked. Now I compare the old route plans to Jack's drawing. And then, if the station controls the surviving West Block the way Lily remembers, the cooperative needs to know it exists. Elijah looked at Lily. She was watching the empty timetable case. Does that mean you can test it? It means I can raise the question. Don't confuse the two. When will you know? When I've checked the route records. Morgan ended the call. Lily stayed long enough to help Elijah seal the edge of the outdoor housing. Before leaving, she gave him her flashlight. I have another, she said. The taped handle fit his hand comfortably. That afternoon, Elijah sent the insurance company photographs of the repaired circuits, covered window, cleared roof drain, and locked control cabinet. Morgan's report went with them. By evening, the company confirmed that coverage would continue while he completed the remaining repairs. It was the first official letter that treated the station as something he could keep. The second message arrived from James. Brianna told me the Tram group is inspecting equipment. Do not agree to anything until we know what belongs to the business. Elijah read it twice. Then another message appeared. I'm coming by tomorrow. Bring every document you found. Elijah didn't bring them. He placed the property sheet on the ticket counter and kept the maintenance log in the locked drawer. James arrived the next morning wearing his work clothes. Brianna came with him, though Elijah hadn't invited either of them. He let them into the waiting room and locked the front door again. James noticed. What's that about? He asked. People have been coming through the gate. You think I'm going to steal something? I think the door should be locked. James walked to the ticket counter. Where are the documents? This shows the station was left to me. I know who got the building. Then what are we doing? We're finding out whether your grandfather stored business property here. Elijah slid the property sheet across the counter. James read the same lines they had read at the house. Former Huron Loop Tram station, including attached fixtures and contents, unless separately listed. His finger stopped there. That doesn't settle equipment, he said. It says contents, unless separately listed. Do you have a separate list? I'm asking if you found one. No? That was true. Elijah had found diagrams, inspection tags, and the maintenance log. None of them listed ownership. James looked toward the utility room hall. Show me the cabinet. No. His father's face tightened. You don't know what you're looking at. Morgan does. Morgan left the shop years ago. She still knows the work. I know the work. Then why did you say Grandpa came here to keep dead things dead? Brianna moved between them without quite standing in the middle. Can we not do this like a fight? She asked. James ignored her. That control cabinet may contain shop parts. It's bolted to the station. So are plenty of things that can be removed. Morgan said not to let anyone remove anything. Morgan doesn't own it, neither do you. The waiting room went quiet. James had expected resistance, but not a closed door. Elijah saw that now. His father had brought no inventory, no records, and no clear claim. He had brought the old expectation that Elijah would step aside once James spoke firmly. Brianna set her folder on a bench. Could we photograph the equipment and compare it to the business records? You can photograph the waiting room, Elijah said. That isn't helpful. It's my answer. James leaned across the counter. If you make this difficult, don't call me when the roof fails or the furnace quits. There isn't a furnace. Exactly. He walked toward the front door. It was locked, and he had to wait for Elijah to open it. Before leaving, James turned back. The shop can't keep giving you work if you're treating me like an enemy. Elijah felt the cost before he answered. The shop work paid better than the small maintenance jobs he'd begun finding. He knew the customers. He knew the vans and the shelves, and where Jack had kept odd parts nobody else could locate. I'm treating the station like mine, he said. James stepped outside. Brianna stayed another moment. You could have shown him. He could have asked without telling me to bring everything. He's worried. So am I. Dad has payroll, suppliers, business loans. You have a building you got for free. Elijah looked around the waiting room. Nothing about this has been free. She picked up her folder and followed James. The calls from the shop stopped. That week, Elijah replaced the waiting room window with money he had saved for the water line. The insurance company accepted the repair, but the station still had no running water. He washed at the cooperative storage shed on maintenance days and carried drinking water in plastic containers. He took work where he could find it. He changed light fixtures in rental units, repaired door closers, cleared drains, painted storerooms, and cleaned rooftop gutters for businesses that didn't want to pay a larger company. He wasn't yet qualified to take every electrical job on his own, so he learned to say no when the work crossed that line. Saying no cost him money. It also kept him from becoming the kind of repairman Jack had warned him about. Morgan came by on Saturdays when the cooperative had no route work. She never worked for free without naming the exchange. Elijah helped her repair the inspection car's battery compartment, and she helped him replace the station's damaged water pipe. He cleaned corrosion from storage shed panels, and she showed him how to seal the platform conduit without trapping moisture. Lily appeared with sandwiches and opinions. "You're painting over bad plaster," she told him one afternoon. "I patched it." "You patched the part that fell. The rest is still attached. So was my kitchen ceiling until it wasn't." Elijah handed her a scraper. She took it. They cleared the whole loose section before painting. Under the final layer, near the ticket window, they found narrow black lines where the original timetable board had been mounted. Lily measured the marks and later brought a replacement frame she'd kept in her garage. It held no schedule yet. Elijah hung it anyway. The station changed slowly because he had to earn each repair before buying it. The roof came first, then water, then a second-hand water heater, a shower upstairs, and insulation in the operators' rooms. He repaired the iron bed frame and found a mattress that fit. The camping pad remained rolled behind the desk for another year, because throwing it away felt careless. He completed his electrical training through evening classes. On nights he was too tired to read. He placed Jack's maintenance log beside his textbook and forced himself through one more page. James attended the qualification ceremony, but stood near the back. He shook Elijah's hand afterward. "Your grandfather would have liked this," he said. Elijah waited for him to add something of his own. James asked whether he wanted more shop work. "Regular hours," Elijah said. "We can figure something out." "On paper?" James looked away toward the parking lot. "You always make it harder than it has to be." They didn't figure it out. Years moved through the station in practical pieces. The waiting room ceiling became smooth and white. The old benches were repaired instead of replaced. Elijah stripped the ticket counter down to its dark green paint and stopped when Lily told him that was the color she remembered. The control cabinet stayed locked. Once each season, Morgan inspected the dry interior and checked the stored fuse without reinstalling it. Elijah recorded temperatures, water leaks, and visible corrosion in a new notebook. He never wrote in Jack's log. The cooperative kept clearing sections of track. Some years it gained permission for one section and lost access to another. Grants were discussed, rejected, changed, and discussed again. Morgan refused to promise anything. James's business struggled. One van disappeared from the lot, then the second. The shop remained open, but fewer workers came through its doors. Elijah noticed without asking. Brianna sold Jack's house 2 years after inheriting it. She did well enough to begin introducing herself as a property consultant, though most of her income still came from office work for another broker. She invited Elijah to the closing dinner. He declined and sent a card. They spoke on birthdays and at Christmas. She visited the station twice. Each time, she asked before going upstairs. That mattered. It wasn't enough to repair what had happened, but it mattered. By the autumn, 5 years after Jack's death, Elijah was 24 and the station had become a home. The upstairs rooms were warm. His tools hung above a workbench in the second operator's room. The waiting hall remained closed to the public, but he used it to repair lamps, small motors, and control boxes for local customers. Every invoice carried the station address. One Monday morning, Morgan arrived before he opened the workshop. She was carrying a cardboard tube and a thick binder. "You have coffee?" she asked. "You only ask that when you want something." "I always want coffee." He poured 2 cups. Morgan unrolled a new route plan across the ticket counter. The paper showed the station, the west block, the river crossing, and a proposed terminus beside the old platform. The cooperative had changed its plan. Instead of trying to restore the entire loop, it wanted to operate a shorter heritage route, using the surviving track west of River Street. Elijah studied the colored lines. You got access? Conditional access. We also have a vehicle plan and enough support to commission the safety study. That sounds almost real. It's close enough to become expensive. She opened the binder to a set of engineering notes. Most meant little to Elijah, but he understood the diagram of the route. Every operational line returned to the gray cabinet in his utility room. Can't you put a new control point somewhere else? He asked. We asked, and Morgan turned to a cost comparison. She covered the figures with one hand before he could read them. This isn't an offer, she said. I didn't say it was. You were about to. I was about to ask why you're hiding numbers in my building. Because they're preliminary, and because I won't have you making decisions from a draft. She moved her hand and pointed to the written conclusion instead. A replacement control location would require new track circuits, new protected conduit, additional land access, and changes to the proposed route. The engineering team considered it impractical within the cooperative's resources. Elijah read the conclusion twice. So, you need this station? We may need this station. You've had 5 years to find another careful word. I used the 5 years finding out whether the route could exist. And now? Now the route can exist only if Jack's control point performs the way his log describes. The scale of it settled slowly. The relay pulse hadn't been a curious remnant. The platform housing wasn't only something Jack had preserved because he hated waste. If the circuit could be verified, every inspection car and passenger tram on the revived section would depend on a system located inside Elijah's home. He looked toward the utility room hall. I wanted to get this place working, he said. You did. I meant the roof, water, lights. I know what you meant. What happens if the system works? The cooperative would need reliable access, scheduled testing, maintenance records, and an operator responsible for the control point. Me? You own it. That doesn't make me qualified. No, training would make you qualified. Elijah stepped away from the plan. And if I don't want strangers coming through my house, then say no. We redesign what we can, fail where we can't, and the route probably stays closed. Morgan didn't soften it. That was one reason he trusted her. For 5 years, keeping the station had been victory enough. A locked door, a working shower, his tools on the wall, and nobody deciding whether he could remain overnight. Now keeping it closed could preserve his shelter and waste the reason Jack had preserved the system. What do you need from me? He asked. First, permission to survey the control cabinet and the station's track connection. Nothing energized, nothing removed. And after that, if the survey supports Jack's records, we discuss a sanctioned test. The nighttime test. Morgan nodded. Elijah looked at the timetable frame Lily had restored. It was still empty. He took the station keys from his pocket, found the utility room key, and placed it on the route plan. You can survey it, he said, but I'm present every time that cabinet opens. Morgan wrote the condition into her access form. Elijah signed beneath it. He was no longer trying only to make the station a place where his family couldn't throw him out. He was deciding whether to become responsible for everyone the station might one day welcome in. The first change Elijah made was to separate access from trust. He replaced the rear door lock with a commercial cylinder and kept the original brass lock in a labeled box. Morgan received a numbered key that opened only the platform entrance and utility hall. The door to the upstairs rooms got its own lock. He also started an access book. Date, time in, time out, reason, and anyone who opened the cabinet, he told Morgan. She signed the first line. You've become difficult. I had a good teacher. You had several. Lily signed beneath Morgan and added retired dispatcher in the purpose column. I like forms, she said. They keep people from improving their memories later. The cooperative survey took 3 days. Morgan brought route drawings, test equipment, and bright orange tags. Elijah cleared the utility room floor and built a temporary work table from 2 sawhorses and an old door. Lily sat near the cabinet with Jack's maintenance log and matched each labeled relay to his entries. Nothing was energized. Morgan traced the control conductors from the timer to the floor conduit. Elijah opened the platform housing and disconnected one lead at a time while she tested from the station. Lily called out Jack's recorded values. The readings weren't identical. They were close enough to show the same path still existed. On the second afternoon, Morgan removed a shield plate near the bottom of the cabinet. Behind it was a narrow manufacturer's label, coated in old varnish and dust. Elijah held the light while she cleaned it with a dry cloth. A serial number appeared in stamped metal. "Photograph that," she said. He took several pictures. "Does it prove anything?" he asked. "It identifies the controller. As Jack's? As this cabinet's. Ownership is a different question." Elijah wrote the serial number in his new access book. Lily turned through the maintenance log. "Jack used the last 4 digits here." She pointed to an entry about a replacement relay base. The number matched the cabinet label. Morgan checked it herself. "That connects the log to this controller," she said, "but not the controller to me." "Correct." Elijah had stopped resenting careful answers. Usually. On the third day, they walked the west block. The cooperative had written permission to inspect the route on foot, but not to move a vehicle. Elijah carried a shovel and clearing tools. Morgan carried the meter. Lily carried nothing because both of them had told her not to, which she considered excessive. They stopped at each track connection marked in Jack's drawing. One junction was filled with water. Elijah dug a shallow channel away from it, cleaned the cover, and replaced a failed gasket with material from his workshop. Another connection had loosened where tree roots lifted the soil. Morgan documented it for later repair. Near the west limit, they found Jack's final marker beneath a mat of dead grass. It was a steel plate beside the rail, painted yellow under the dirt. Lily stood over it. "He put this here after the city removed the old signal post," she said. "Were you with him?" Elijah asked. "I told him he was wasting paint." "You were wrong." "I was often wrong. I just wasn't usually careless." Morgan connected the meter at the marker. Elijah returned to the platform housing with a handheld radio. "West limit ready," Morgan said through the speaker. Elijah connected the test lead the way Lily had shown him. The meter beside Morgan responded. "Path confirmed," she said. Lily's voice came next. "Make him do it twice." Elijah disconnected and repeated the procedure. The second result held. Back at the station, Morgan drew a line across the route plan from the control cabinet to the west marker. "This is enough for me to approach the board," she said. "For the nighttime test?" "For permission to arrange one. We still need an engineer. We need an approved inspection car movement. We need the ownership question settled before I spend cooperative money." Elijah looked at the cabinet serial in his access book. "What settles it?" "Your deed may have an equipment attachment. The property sheet says contents, unless separately listed. That's a summary. Probate files often include schedules showing what moved with each asset. Brianna saw the drafts. Don't ask Brianna what you own." Morgan said it without anger. That made it easier to hear. Elijah closed the access book. "Where do I ask?" "The court file first. Then the recorded deed." The next morning, he went to the county offices with his property sheet, identification, and Jack's probate case number. The public file contained more pages than the packet James had placed on the dining room table 5 years earlier. Elijah sat at a counter and read every one. Most were ordinary: property descriptions, account summaries, signatures, notices, and receipts. The station transfer had a recorded deed followed by an attachment titled Equipment and Fixture Schedule. That attachment had not been included in Elijah's packet. He felt the old anger return, but this time it had somewhere useful to go. The schedule listed the waiting room benches, ticket counter, platform housings, attached signal conduit, night bell, relay cabinet, and Huron loop station controller. Beside the controller was a serial number. Elijah compared it to the photograph on his phone. The beginning matched, the ending matched. One middle digit on the varnish cabinet plate was still hard to read. He didn't treat that as proof. He paid for a certified copy and requested the recorded attachment as well. The seal pressed into the paper made a raised circle beneath his thumb. On his way out, he called Morgan. "I found the schedule. Does it identify the controller?" "Yes." "Exact serial?" "One digit on the cabinet is unclear." "Then we don't call it a match yet." "I knew you'd say that. You called because you wanted me to." She was right. Elijah returned to the station and stored the certified copy in a fire-resistant document case. He sent Morgan a scan, then called Lily. I need you to identify your entries in Jack's log formally, he said. Formally how? Sit with Morgan, go page by page, and sign a statement saying which checks you witnessed. Lily was quiet. Are you still there? Elijah asked. I'm enjoying this. What? You telling me what the investigation needs? Will you do it? Yes, but I won't sign anything Morgan writes badly. Morgan wrote it well enough. They met 2 days later at the ticket counter. Lily identified her initials, the West Platform housing, the portable shunt checks, and the dates she had been present. She made clear that she had never witnessed the full vehicle test or heard the bell after Jack's rebuild. Elijah appreciated that, more than a broader claim. Morgan added Lily's statement to the survey file. Then she gave Elijah a letter on cooperative stationery. It stated that the Huron Loop Cooperative had a formal interest in using the station as the route's control point, subject to engineering verification, ownership confirmation, safety approval, and an operating agreement with Elijah. There was no payment figure. There should be a number, he said. There will be if the test works. What if I need to know whether this is worth doing? Morgan looked around the waiting hall. You already decided it was worth finding out. That's not the same as taking on passengers. No, it isn't. She pointed to the paragraph about access and maintenance. Read that part again. The cooperative would require continuous maintenance records, emergency access, scheduled inspections, and a responsible operator. Failure of the station control point could stop the whole route. Elijah read it twice. This doesn't make me rich, he said. No, it makes me on call. Yes. And you're smiling. I'm trying not to. He signed permission for Morgan to submit the survey to the board. That afternoon, he began changing the station for a purpose beyond the survey. He cleared the rear utility hall so an operator could reach the cabinet without passing through his workshop. He repaired the platform canopy light and replaced its corroded switch. He moved customer projects out of the waiting room and marked a safe path between the front door and ticket counter. Lily helped him clean the timetable frame. Don't print a schedule yet, she said. I wasn't going to. You were thinking about it. I was measuring. That's how thinking starts. At dusk, Morgan switched on the platform light. It shone across the repaired edge of the canopy and onto the first section of cleared rail. People on the river path slowed to look. One man raised a phone and took a picture. Elijah stood beside the rear door with the access book under his arm. The station looked awake. 3 days later, the cooperative board approved the next stage. Morgan posted the required survey notice inside the waiting room window. It named the station as the proposed Huron Loop control point and terminus. By noon, Brianna had called twice. Elijah didn't answer while he was working. She arrived before 5, followed by James in the remaining shop van. James read the notice through the glass before Elijah opened the door. So it's true, he said. The cooperative is studying the route. They need this building. They're evaluating the system. Brianna walked along the platform edge, looking toward the river and then back at the brick walls. How much land comes with it? She asked. The parcel on the deed. Does it reach the access road? You've seen the property records, not the final survey. James entered the waiting room. His attention went to the utility room hall. You still have the old controller? It hasn't moved? Good. Elijah heard the change in that single word. 5 years earlier, James had called the station a burden. Now the equipment's presence relieved him. What do you want? Elijah asked. James placed both hands on the ticket counter. The business can absorb the property, he said. We'll take the taxes, maintenance, all of it. You get the assessed value, which is $22,000. Brianna looked at their father. She hadn't known he planned to make an offer. James continued before she could interrupt. You can rent a proper apartment. Put something aside. You've done more here than anyone expected, but this is where you stop carrying it. Elijah looked at the repaired benches, the clean timetable frame, and the certified schedule locked behind the counter. 5 years earlier, he might have heard concern. Now, he heard a price attached to access. The station isn't for sale, he said. James's eyes moved toward the survey notice. For the first time, he looked at his son's home as something standing between him and what he needed. James didn't raise his voice. That made the offer harder to dismiss. The shop owes suppliers, he said. Insurance went up. 2 commercial customers haven't paid in months. You said the business could absorb this property. It can if the cooperative needs it, so you'd use the station to cover the business. I'd use an asset to protect what your grandfather spent his life building. Elijah stood behind the ticket counter. He spent part of his life building this too. James looked toward the utility room. Those relays came through the shop, he said. I remember boxes stacked near his workbench. Remembering boxes doesn't make the cabinet yours. It means we need to check. Brianna returned from the platform. The parcel reaches the access road. I checked the county map. Elijah turned to her. Why? Because a developer I know has been buying small industrial properties near the river. James frowned. This isn't about a developer. It could be. A restored tram stop changes the area. You want to sell the land out from under the root? Elijah asked. I want you to know what you have. I know where I live. You always say that, like it ends the discussion. It ends this one. Brianna set her bag on a bench. I could approach the developer without naming you. Just find out whether there's interest. And get a commission. If I do the work, yes. James gave her an irritated look. Their motives had arrived together, but they weren't the same. James wanted money quickly enough to keep the repair business alive. Brianna wanted to stand between a valuable property and whoever wanted it next. Elijah wanted both of them out of the station. He unlocked the front door. I'm not selling, he said. I'm not transferring it to the business. Nobody approaches a developer. James didn't move. Show me the equipment schedule. Elijah's silence told him enough. You found it, James said. I found the complete probate file. Brianna looked at their father. There was an equipment schedule? It may not settle anything. It lists the controller with the station, Elijah said. Does the serial match? One digit needs professional confirmation. James nodded slowly. Then you don't know. I know it wasn't left out by accident. You know what a piece of paper says. Your grandfather used business money and business parts for years. If he attached shop equipment to a separate property, the estate may need to correct that. Elijah opened the door wider. Then you'll have to prove it. James looked at him for a long time. All right, he said. He walked out. Brianna picked up her bag but remained near the bench. Do you understand what you just told him to do? Yes. No, you don't. Dad's scared. He thinks the shop could be gone by spring. Then he should talk to the people the shop owes. He's trying to save it. With my station, with something Grandpa may have paid for through the business. Elijah held the door. Brianna stepped onto the platform. If you make this a legal fight, Morgan's group will walk away. She said it as a warning. It sounded like a plan. 4 days later, Morgan took the survey notice out of the window. She laid it face down on the ticket counter. The board suspended the test application, she said. Elijah looked at the blank side of the paper. Because James complained, because the cooperative received a written ownership objection from James and Brianna. Brianna signed it too? Yes. What does she claim? That the controller is removable equipment belonging to the larger estate and wasn't properly transferred with the real property. The schedule says it was. The schedule says it was intended to be. That's the same thing. Not to a board deciding whether to spend money on an engineering test. Morgan opened her binder and showed him a copy of the objection. James claimed some components had been purchased through Torres Electrical Repair. Brianna claimed the station's public valuation did not include specialized control equipment and that the family division had relied on incomplete information. Neither claim proved ownership. Together, they created enough doubt to stop the cooperative. They waited 5 years, Elijah said. Nobody cared what the valuation included until your notice went up. I know? Then tell the board that. I did. And, Morgan tapped the objection, their timing doesn't make this disappear. Elijah walked to the utility room door. The cabinet stood behind it, locked and dry. Nothing about the equipment had changed. The route plan hadn't changed. Jack's log hadn't changed. Yet the practical value of all three had vanished the moment the cooperative stopped moving. When was the engineer coming? He asked. We hadn't contracted one. I had an available date under discussion. Do you still have it? No. That was the first real loss. A date wasn't proof, but it had been movement. Survey, approval, engineer, test. Elijah had seen the path. Now the path ended at a family objection. What do they want from me? He asked. James wants the station transferred at the assessed value. Brianna wants authority to explore a property sale. She told you that? She attached proposed conditions. Elijah held out his hand. Morgan gave him the remaining pages. Brianna's conditions allowed the cooperative to continue studying the system while she sought development interest. Any operating arrangement would have to preserve the option to move the controller or rebuild it elsewhere. Morgan had marked that sentence. You said rebuilding elsewhere wouldn't work, Elijah said. Not within our resources. She knows that. Yes. So she's using the route to raise the land value while keeping the right to remove the thing the route needs. That's how I read it. Elijah set the pages down. Can they enter the station? No. Can they remove anything? Not without your permission or an order. Can they stop me maintaining it? No. Then what can I do? Respond with the recorded deed, the certified schedule, and photographs showing the controller is installed as part of the station system. I have all of that. It may be enough to defeat the claim later. It isn't enough for my board today. Elijah looked at her. What is? The serial match. An engineer needs to examine the controller plate without altering it, compare it to the schedule, and document whether this is a fixed control point or equipment that can reasonably be removed. That's the same engineer we lost because of the objection? Yes. He laughed once without humor. That's convenient. It's common. Can the cooperative hire one just for ownership? The board won't. Can I? You can, if you pay for it. Elijah thought about the envelope and account he used for station repairs. He had saved enough to replace the remaining platform canopy supports before winter. An engineer would take most of that money, perhaps all of it. If I pay, James will say I bought the answer. Then the engineer's independence matters. Do you know one? I know several. I'm not giving you a name until you decide what you're asking them to do. Confirm the serial. And, Elijah waited. Morgan folded her arms. You keep talking as if the number is the only issue. It isn't. If the controller belongs with the station, so does the responsibility for it. You can defeat your family's claim and still refuse the route. You can also sell later. I need to know whether I'm helping you protect a home or preparing an operating control point. Both. Those may conflict. It's already my home, and operating access changes that. Inspections happen when they're needed. Failures don't wait until you finish customer work. A public waiting room brings people, complaints, cleaning, locks, insurance, and every ordinary problem that comes through a public door. Elijah looked upstairs. For 5 years, the locks had meant safety. The station belonged to him because he decided who entered and when. The route would ask him to give up part of that control. James and Brianna had made the decision seem simpler by trying to take it from him. It still wasn't simple. I want the controller inspected, Elijah said. Morgan didn't move. For what purpose? To establish that it belongs to the station and determine whether it can safely serve the route. That answer goes in writing. Then write it. She did. Elijah signed the request and agreed to pay the inspection cost if the cooperative's board did not reimburse it after a successful test. He also agreed not to sell, remove, alter, or allow work on the controller while the inspection was pending. The canopy repair money became inspection money. That evening, James called. You hired someone? He asked. I requested an independent inspection. With Morgan? She isn't doing the authentication. You're spending money to prove something Grandpa already paid for. I'm spending money to find out what I'm responsible for. James was silent. Then he said, the shop account is nearly empty. Elijah sat on the repaired bench beneath the blank timetable frame. I'm sorry. You could help. Not by giving you the station. I'm not asking for a gift. I offered you its full assessed value. You offered the number everyone used when they thought it was useless. James breathed heavily into the phone. You think I threw you out because I didn't care what happened to you. Elijah looked toward the front door. Why did you? He asked. I thought you'd come back when you were ready to act like an adult. I was 19. You put my bag outside. I was angry. You were in charge. That ended the argument more completely than anger would have. James lowered his voice. If the business closes, your grandfather's name comes off that building. Elijah knew which building he meant. The repair shop had carried Jack's name for decades. Losing it would hurt, even after everything. But handing over the station wouldn't restore the way James ran the business. It would only give him something else to spend, while the old problems remained. I won't trade one part of Grandpa's work to delay losing another, Elijah said. James ended the call. The next morning, Elijah removed the timetable frame from the wall, so dust from the planned inspection wouldn't damage it. He postponed the canopy order and moved the saved money into a separate account for the engineer. Then he opened the access book to a clean page. At the top, he wrote, "Independent Controller Authentication." Below it, he wrote the cost he was accepting. "Station remains intact. Home access changes if route proceeds. Operator duty stays with owner." He signed his name before anyone asked him to. At 9 the next morning, Elijah carried the certified schedule back to the county offices. He asked for the recorded deed, every attachment filed with it, and confirmation that the equipment schedule belonged to the final document rather than an earlier draft. The clerk compared the page numbers, filing stamp, and recording reference. Then she printed a full certified copy as one packet. The equipment schedule appeared directly behind the station deed. No page had been added later. No correction had moved the controller into Elijah's property. Jack had filed it that way from the beginning. The clerk didn't decide whether the faded serial matched the cabinet. She didn't decide whether the control system worked. She confirmed one narrow fact. The schedule James and Brianna challenged was part of the recorded transfer. Elijah paid the copying fee and left. Morgan was waiting at the station with Lily. Elijah placed the certified packet on the ticket counter and opened it to the attachment. Morgan compared the recording references. "This removes the draft argument," she said. "Will the board restart the test? It gives me something to take back." Lily put on her reading glasses and examined the controller entry. "The description is Jack's," she said. "How can you tell?" Elijah asked. "He called it the station controller. The old route inventory called it Relay Assembly 4. Does that help? It explains why James may not recognize it in the business records." Morgan looked at her. "Would the shop have bought parts for it?" "Of course. Jack bought screws for his kitchen through the shop if he was already placing an order." "That's not ideal," Elijah said. "It was a small business. Ideal spent more time in the handbook than the building." Morgan copied the certified packet for the cooperative file. "The question isn't whether a shop invoice paid for a replacement relay," she said. "The schedule identifies the installed controller as part of the station transfer. The serial match confirms which controller it means. And the test confirms whether that controller has any use." "Yes." Elijah looked at the black bell above the utility room cabinet. "What if the serial matches and the bell doesn't ring? You still own the system. But the route can't use it, not without repairs, and possibly not at all." Lily removed her glasses. "Jack would have written the failure if he'd seen one." "He didn't complete the test," Morgan said. "I know." None of them said what that meant. Jack's confidence remained in the log, but confidence wasn't the thing they needed. Morgan took the certified packet to the cooperative board that afternoon. The board allowed the engineering work to proceed under strict conditions. The inspection car could move only within the section already approved for cooperative access. The route would remain closed to everyone else. The controller would be energized only with a rail systems engineer present. The family objection would stay in the file until the serial and installation were authenticated. Authority had opened the next door. Elijah still had to walk through it. Morgan called him from her truck after the meeting. "We have one available night before the inspection car goes into winter service." "When?" "Next Thursday." Elijah looked at the station calendar. "That's 8 days. I can count." "What has to be done?" "Clear the west block again. Inspect every connection Jack marked. Test the public power. Secure the platform. Prepare the cabinet without altering it. And the engineer? I have one who can come. Does he know about the ownership objection? He has the deed schedule, the survey, and Jack's log entries. He knows he's being asked to verify a system, not settle a family argument. Good." Morgan was quiet for a moment. James and Brianna have the right to submit information before the board relies on the result. Do they have to be at the test? No. Elijah looked at the access book. "I want them invited. You don't owe them that. I'm not doing it because I owe them. Then why? Because if it works, I don't want them saying we hid how it happened." Morgan accepted the answer. Elijah sent each of them the same message. "The cooperative has approved a controlled inspection next Thursday night. An independent engineer will examine the installed controller and compare it with the recorded equipment schedule. You may attend as observers. You may not enter restricted areas or handle equipment," Brianna replied first. "Can we bring someone for the property side?" "No," Elijah wrote. "Submit documents to Morgan before the test." James didn't reply. The next morning, Brianna came to the workshop alone. She had dressed for an office meeting and wore shoes that collected grit from the platform. Elijah was repairing a restaurant's warming cabinet at his workbench. He finished tightening the cover before speaking. "What documents do you want to submit?" he asked. "I came to talk." "About the test?" "About avoiding it." Elijah unplugged the warming cabinet. Brianna placed a printed property map on the bench. Colored lines marked the station parcel, the access road, and nearby industrial lots. "The developer is interested," she said. "You contacted them. I didn't use your name. You used my property. I asked a general question. That isn't what I told you. You don't get to tell me who I can speak to. No, I get to tell you not to offer what I own. I didn't offer it." Elijah waited. Brianna lowered her voice. They'd consider a mixed-use project that preserves the station frontage, shops, apartments, maybe a public tram entrance if the cooperative pays. There isn't room for that without taking the workshop and platform. It would be redesigned. So the station wouldn't operate as it is. It would be worth more, to you, to everyone. She opened her bag and removed a one-page agreement. It would authorize her to discuss the parcel as Elijah's broker. No sale could occur without his signature, but Brianna would receive a commission if any deal followed her introduction. "If you sign this," she said, "I'll withdraw my part of the ownership objection." Elijah read the page. "And Dad? I think he'll withdraw if there's a real sale option. That isn't what he asked for. He needs money. He doesn't care where it comes from. He cares about the shop. He cares about not failing with the shop." The sentence came out sharper than Brianna intended. She looked toward the waiting room. "Don't repeat that," she said. "I won't." "You could, at the board meeting. You could tell everyone Dad only challenged the equipment because he's broke. You could tell them I knew the station was in your name before Grandpa died. I could. It would make us look dishonest." "Were you?" Brianna folded the property map along a line that hadn't been there. "I should have told you about the draft," she said. "That doesn't mean Grandpa divided things fairly." Elijah looked at the broker agreement again. Signing it would remove her objection. It might remove James's. The engineering test could proceed without a family dispute hanging over it. If the controller worked, the developer would want the site more. Elijah could sell, pay off his father's business debts, give Brianna her commission, and move into a clean apartment where the roof belonged to someone else. It was the easier path if he treated the station as a price. He tore neither page. He slid them back to her. "I'm not signing." Brianna's face went still. "Then don't act like you had no way to help Dad. I offered to help at the shop for regular pay 5 years ago. He wanted my station instead. You know this is bigger than a job now." "Yes." "That's why you should use it. I am. For a volunteer tram route, for the thing Grandpa kept it able to do." Brianna picked up the papers. "And you're going to tell the board about our conversation. I'm going to give Morgan the ownership documents. That's all. You could make the objection disappear by embarrassing us. I could make you regret it. That isn't the same as proving I own the controller." She looked at him, suspicious of the mercy, because it came with no forgiveness. "What happens if the bell rings?" she asked. "I don't know that it will. But if it does? Then Morgan discusses an operating agreement with me." "How much?" "She hasn't given me terms." Brianna believed him. That worried her more than a number would have. Elijah wasn't refusing a known offer. He was accepting risk without asking the family to approve it. She left with the broker agreement unsigned. The next 8 days were filled with work. Elijah and Morgan cleared the West Block on foot. Lily checked Jack's entries against each junction. Elijah repaired the water seal at the platform housing and replaced a broken hasp on the rear gate. He installed temporary barriers along the platform edge and tested the emergency lights. Morgan brought the cooperative's inspection car to the storage shed near the west approach, but it remained off the block. It was a small maintenance vehicle with steel wheels, work lamps, and a covered cab. On test night, Morgan would move it under the engineer's direction. The day before the test, Elijah and Morgan opened the controller cabinet. The removed fuse remained sealed in its envelope. The varnished serial plate was untouched. Morgan photographed both with that day's date. "Once the fuse goes in, we follow Jack's sequence exactly," she said. "No cleaning first, not unless the engineer orders it. We test what exists. If a relay sticks, the test stops. If the bell rings more than once, the test stops. If nothing happens, we document it. Each answer left less room for hope and more room for truth." At 6 that evening, James arrived. He stood beneath the platform light while Elijah checked the rear lock. "I got your invitation," he said. "Are you coming?" "I haven't decided. The test starts at 9. James looked through the open utility room door at the gray cabinet. I found old invoices, he said. The shop paid for relays and wire after the route closed. Submit them. They could hurt your claim. If they identify this controller, submit them. James studied his son's face. You'd rather risk losing it than let this go quietly. I'd rather have the right question answered. And if it belongs to the business? Elijah looked at the cabinet, then at the rooms above it. Then I'll deal with that result. He meant it. That was the final cost James hadn't expected. Elijah wasn't asking the test to reward him. He was allowing it to tell the truth, even if the truth took something away. James left without saying whether he would return. On Thursday night, Elijah closed the workshop early. He swept the waiting room floor and placed Jack's maintenance log, Lily's statement, the certified deed packet, and the access book on the ticket counter. Morgan called to confirm the track was secured. Lily called to say she was bringing her own chair because cooperative chairs were terrible. At 8:30, Elijah unlocked the rear operator's door. Then he opened the front entrance for his family, turned on the platform light, and waited for everyone whose future might change when the inspection car moved onto Jack's old block. Lily arrived first, carrying a folding chair with a padded seat. I warned you, she told Morgan. I'm not spending an hour on cold metal. Morgan was wearing a radio clipped to her vest. Stay behind the yellow line, and you can sit on a sofa if you bring one. Caleb Huang arrived next. At 39, he had the calm manner of someone who expected machines to disappoint him and preferred finding out exactly how. He placed 2 instrument cases on the ticket counter and introduced himself to Elijah. You're the owner and proposed operator? I'm the owner. The rest depends on tonight. That's the right answer. Caleb examined the access book before entering the utility hall. He checked the lockout tag, the sealed fuse envelope, and the photographs Morgan had taken the day before. James arrived while Caleb was photographing the cabinet. He carried a file box from Torres Electrical Repair. Brianna followed with her property folder. Neither spoke to Elijah beyond saying hello. At 8:50, Morgan gathered everyone in the waiting room. The west block is closed and secured, she said. Only the inspection car will move. Caleb controls the test. I operate the car. Elijah operates the station equipment under Caleb's direction. Lily observes the sequence against Jack's log. James and Brianna remain in the waiting room or designated platform area. James raised the file box. Before anything is energized, these need to be reviewed. Caleb looked at Morgan. They're business invoices, James said. Relays, wire, and control parts purchased after the loop closed. Morgan took the box but didn't open it. Were these submitted before tonight? She asked. I found the last folder this afternoon. Then they go into the record after we copy them. They don't change the safety sequence. They change who has authority to test. Elijah stood near the ticket counter. He said nothing yet. James continued. My father used shop accounts to rebuild that system. The station was left to Elijah at a public value that didn't include specialized equipment. The controller belongs to the repair business or the remaining estate. Brianna opened her folder. The property could be used without the cabinet, she said. The system is removable. If the cooperative wants it, that should be negotiated with all 3 heirs. We're not all heirs to the station, Elijah said. We're heirs affected by an incorrect division. You signed the objection, James said to Brianna. Let me finish. Brianna closed her mouth, but she didn't withdraw what she'd said. James faced Caleb. Elijah was 19 when this property was transferred. He didn't know what was inside it. None of us did. My father kept poor records near the end. A schedule attached to one deed doesn't erase where the equipment came from. That was the version James had chosen. The building could belong to Elijah, but anything useful inside it had to belong to someone else. Jack's final paperwork was confusion. The invoices were intention. Elijah's 5 years of work were beside the point. James set the box on the counter. I'm asking you not to proceed until ownership is resolved. Caleb didn't touch the invoices. My role is to identify and test the installed system, he said. I don't divide estates. I document equipment, configuration, condition, and function. If it turns out to be business property, you'll have tested it without permission, Morgan answered. The recorded owner authorized the test. The controller is listed on his deed schedule. Your objection is noted, but no one has ordered the cooperative to stop. James looked at Elijah. You're going ahead? Elijah could still have delayed. He could have moved the argument away from the station and waited for papers, meetings, and people who hadn't seen the cabinet to decide what it meant. Instead, he unlocked the fire-resistant document case. He placed the complete certified deed packet beside James's invoices. "The schedule is part of the final recorded transfer," he said. The clerk confirmed it. Jack listed the installed controller with the station. "If the serial doesn't match, your objection stays. If it does, you deal with what he actually filed. You think one number answers everything?" "No. That's why we're also testing what the number belongs to." James's expression hardened. "And if the shop paid for it?" "Then the invoices show Grandpa used shop parts. They don't change the deed he signed later." Brianna looked between the two documents. "What if the controller can be removed?" she asked Caleb. "Any object can be removed with enough damage," he said. "The useful question is whether it functions as a property-specific installed system." Morgan checked the time. "We begin in 3 minutes." Caleb opened the gray cabinet. Elijah stood beside him. Lily took her chair to the safe area outside the utility room door and opened Jack's maintenance log on her lap. Caleb inspected the fuse and returned it to the holder. He connected meters across the low-voltage feed and relay contacts. A separate recorder clipped to the output leading toward the track circuit. "Public service stable," he said. Morgan answered through the radio from the inspection car. "West approach secure." Car stopped short of block. Caleb looked at Elijah. "Energize control branch." Elijah switched on the breaker. The timer module came alive. The amber indicator glowed, went dark, then returned. The relay arm moved with the same soft snap Elijah had first heard 5 years earlier. Caleb watched his meters. "Continuity pulse present," he said. "No track occupancy indicated." Lily found the boxed entry in Jack's log. "Sequence agrees through initial feed," she said. James stood at the waiting room entrance. Brianna had moved beside the ticket window, where she could see the cabinet and part of the platform. Caleb tested the failsafe by opening one connection inside the cabinet. The relay released immediately. The amber light went dark. "Open circuit produces safe state," he said. He restored the connection. The pulse returned. "Station equipment responds. Prepare vehicle movement." Morgan's voice came over the radio. "Inspection car ready." Caleb nodded to Elijah. "Night bell selector." Elijah found the small black switch Jack had labeled Night. It had been sealed beneath a clear cover. Caleb broke the old inspection wire, documented it, and lifted the cover. "Move selector to test position." Elijah moved the switch. Nothing rang. Caleb looked toward Lily. She read from the log. "Night feed armed. 1 car enters west block. Hold until relay settles." Caleb spoke into the radio. "Advance at walking speed. Stop when front axle enters the marked block." Outside, the inspection car's work lamps moved between the trees. The sound reached the station a moment later, steel wheels rolling carefully on rail that hadn't carried an authorized vehicle in years. Elijah watched the amber indicator. The inspection car crossed the west marker. The track circuit changed. The relay arm dropped. The black bell above the cabinet rang once. It was a plain, hard sound. Not musical, not loud enough for the whole neighborhood. Inside the station, it filled every room. Then it stopped. No second strike followed. Elijah kept his hand away from the controls. Lily stared at the line in Jack's log. Her finger rested beneath the words, "Confirm, single bell." On the platform, the inspection car remained still. Caleb watched the recorder for several seconds. "Block occupied," he said. "Fail-safe response held. Single warning registered." Morgan's reply came quietly through the radio. "Copy." James sat down on the nearest bench. Brianna didn't move. Caleb ordered the car reversed out of the block. As its wheels cleared the marker, the relay returned to its normal position. The amber pulse resumed. The bell stayed quiet. "Block clear," Caleb said. He directed Elijah to move the selector out of test position and switch off the control branch. Then he removed the fuse again and sealed it in a new envelope. Only after the system was safe did he examine the serial plate. He used a magnifying light and a small amount of approved cleaner on the varnish. The unclear middle digit appeared. Caleb read the full serial aloud. Elijah opened the certified equipment schedule. The number matched. Caleb photographed the plate beside a scale marker, then photographed the schedule separately. He examined the conduit connections, the cabinet anchors, and the underground feed. "This controller is installed as the station control point," he said. "It isn't a loose relay assembly or portable shop equipment. The cabinet serial matches the controller assigned on the recorded schedule. James looked at his invoices. "What about these?" he asked. Caleb opened the first folder. "They show purchases of replacement components. None of the descriptions identifies ownership of the installed controller. Keep them with your records." He packed his testing leads. His finding didn't punish James. It didn't award Elijah anything new. It connected the controller in the wall to the controller Jack had deliberately listed with the station. That was enough. Brianna sat beside James. "Grandpa knew the number," she said. Lily closed the maintenance log. Jack knew every number in that cabinet. "Why didn't he tell us?" James asked. Lily looked at him. "You told him the station should be stripped and sold." James's face changed. "That was years ago." "Yes." "What did he say?" "He said the system belonged where it could still do its job." James looked toward Elijah. "And he thought a 19-year-old could run it?" "No," Lily said. "He thought Elijah would learn before pretending he knew." Elijah lowered his eyes. Praise from Lily usually came disguised as criticism. This one was no different. She continued. "Jack asked me once who still lifted the front door before forcing the lock. I said Elijah did. Jack said that was the one person in the family he trusted to find out why something resisted." The brass key felt heavy in Elijah's pocket. Morgan returned from the inspection car. She signed the test record, then gave it to Caleb. He added his findings and signed beneath hers. Before leaving, Caleb placed copies of the serial, photographs, and circuit results into the cooperative file in Elijah's document case. "The control point performed tonight," he said. "Continued operation requires the repairs and procedures in my report. Don't treat one successful test as permanent safety." "I won't," Elijah said. Caleb closed his cases and left, his one job finished. Morgan waited until the rear gate was secured. Then she brought a prepared lease packet from her truck. "The board authorized this if the system passed and the serial matched," she said. James and Brianna remained in the waiting room. They heard every word. "The cooperative is offering Elijah an operating lease for the station control point, platform access, and waiting hall. $3,200 a month. Elijah retains ownership." James looked up. Brianna stared at the route plan attached to the lease. Morgan continued. "The lease requires safety compliance within 90 days, scheduled access, maintenance records, operator training, public liability coverage, and continuous availability during service." Elijah read the first page. The money would remove the immediate fear that one roof failure could take his home. The obligations filled several more pages. "If I miss the safety deadline," he asked, "the lease doesn't begin. If the system fails later, service stops until it's safe. And the apartment remains private. Emergency access ends at the operator hall, unless life safety requires more." Elijah turned to the signature page. James spoke from the bench. "You should have someone review that." "I will, then don't sign tonight." Morgan answered before Elijah could. "He can accept the offer and safety deadline tonight. The final lease is executed after review." Elijah signed the acknowledgement. "I accept," he said. Not because the bell had made him wealthy. It hadn't. It had made the station necessary, and it had made him responsible. Morgan signed beneath him. The 90 days began the next morning. By 9 the next morning, Morgan had covered the ticket counter with inspection reports. The list was longer than the one she'd made 5 years earlier. The platform needed a continuous handrail near the western edge. 2 canopy supports required replacement. The operator hall needed emergency lighting, a fire-rated door, and clear separation from Elijah's apartment. The control cabinet required new protective covers, updated labels, and a written shutdown procedure. The waiting room needed accessible entry hardware, smoke detection, and a second clear exit path. Elijah read every page. "When does the first lease payment arrive?" he asked. "After compliance is approved and the final lease is signed. So I pay for this before the lease starts. You pay for the building work. The cooperative covers route equipment, training, and work, specific to the inspection car. What if I run out of money on day 89? Then we have a difficult conversation on day 90. Morgan handed him a marker. They divided the tasks into station, cooperative, and shared responsibility. The station column remained the longest. Elijah postponed customer work for 3 days and began with the operator hall. He removed shelves, moved his repair bench upstairs, and marked the wall where the fire-rated door would go. At noon, James came through the front entrance. He stopped at the access book. Do I sign this? Yes. James wrote his name, time, and purpose. Under purpose, he put ownership objection. Elijah looked at him. I'm withdrawing it, James said. He handed over a signed notice addressed to the cooperative and the probate file. It stated that he no longer disputed the station controller's inclusion with Elijah's property. Brianna's signature wasn't on it. She'll file her own, James said. Did you talk to her? She talks enough without my help. Elijah placed the withdrawal in the document case. Thank you. Don't. For what? Don't make it sound generous. I saw the number. I saw the installation. I don't have a claim. That was accountability as far as James could manage it. He would correct the paperwork. He wouldn't yet say what his pressure had done. What happens to the shop? Elijah asked. I'm selling the remaining van. The landlord agreed to let me out early if I clear the space. Are you closing? I'm taking service calls from home, smaller jobs. You could have done that before. James's face tightened. I came to withdraw the objection, and I accepted it. Neither spoke for a moment. James looked toward the operator hall. You'll need a rated enclosure around that panel. It's on the list. I have leftover board at the shop. How much? You can have it. I'll pay. Elijah. I'll pay what it's worth, and you give me a receipt. James almost argued. Then he gave a tired nod. All right. That was the arrangement they could manage. Materials for money, work written down. No gifts that became leverage later. James left without asking to see the cabinet. Brianna arrived the following evening with 3 boxes in the back of her car. She signed the access book without being reminded. What's in those? Elijah asked. Grandpa's tools. She opened the first box. Jack's wood-handled screwdrivers lay in a canvas roll. The second held his soldering iron, hand drill, inspection mirror, and an old meter that no longer met current standards. The third contained station keys, brass labels, and small tools Brianna had packed from the basement before selling the house. You kept all this? I put it in storage. For 5 years? I didn't know what to do with it. You could have asked, I know. She carried the boxes no farther than the waiting room. I withdrew my objection this morning, she said. Morgan has the copy. And the developer? I told them I had no authority to discuss the parcel. Elijah examined the brass labels. Most belonged to rooms that no longer existed. One read, Platform Power. Why now? He asked. Because I watched the test. That didn't change who owned the station. No. It changed how hard it was for me to pretend I was protecting the family. She didn't apologize again. She had already discovered that saying she was sorry made her feel better faster than it helped Elijah. Instead, she opened her bag and removed work gloves. Morgan said the waiting room paint has to be stripped near the second exit. You called Morgan? I asked what I could do that didn't involve property. Elijah looked at the gloves. You can work in the public rooms when I'm here, he said. You don't enter the utility hall. You don't bring anyone to look at the building. You don't post pictures or discuss a sale. Okay. If you disagree, you leave. I said, okay. She signed into the access book again the next Saturday and spent 6 hours scraping paint from the rear waiting room door. She complained about dust, ruined one brush, and stayed until the wood was clean enough for Elijah to repair. When her phone rang, she stepped onto the platform to answer it. She didn't photograph the building. Elijah noticed. He didn't reward her with trust she hadn't earned yet. He handed her another section to scrape. The safety work consumed the next 2 months. Morgan trained Elijah on the controller's shutdown sequence and had him repeat it until he could perform it in darkness. Lily sat behind the ticket counter with a stopwatch. You missed the access entry, she said after one practice. It's an emergency shutdown. And after the emergency, I make the entry. When the system is safe. Lily stopped the watch. Good. Again. The cooperative installed route radios and a secure key box outside the operator entrance. Elijah insisted that emergency keys open the operator hall, but not the apartment stairs. Morgan accepted that boundary and wrote it into the procedure. Elijah used most of his savings on the fire-rated separation, canopy supports, handrail, alarms, and insurance deposit. He took customer work after dinner to keep paying ordinary bills. Some nights, the workshop lights stayed on past midnight. The monthly lease amount existed only on paper. The costs arrived immediately. Brianna worked 5 more Saturdays. She cleaned benches, sanded window trim, and helped Lily reinstall the timetable frame. She suggested a better color for the public doors. Lily rejected it before Elijah could answer. The doors were green, Lily said. They could still be green, just a warmer green. Green isn't a temperature. Brianna looked at Elijah for support. He handed her the original paint sample Morgan had protected during the survey. That green, he said. Brianna used that green. James delivered the fire-rated board in the remaining shop van. Elijah paid the invoice before unloading it. You need help carrying this, James said. I can manage. I didn't offer to own the wall. Elijah looked at him, then opened the rear operator door. They carried the sheets together. James stayed in the marked hall and didn't touch the cabinet. After the last sheet was inside, he noticed Jack's tool roll on the work table. Brianna brought those? Yes. I thought they were gone. She kept them. James ran one finger over the worn canvas. He used that small screwdriver for everything, he said. Wrong size half the time. Elijah waited. James put his hands into his jacket pockets. I shouldn't have put your bag outside, he said. It was the first time he had named the action without explaining why it had happened. No, Elijah said. You shouldn't have. I thought you'd call the next morning. I did call. You asked for the meter. James closed his eyes briefly. I remember. Elijah didn't tell him it was all right. It wasn't. I'm not going back to how we were, he said. I know. If you come here, you follow the same rules as everyone. James looked at the access book. All right, you don't make decisions about the station. All right. Elijah opened the rear door. James stepped outside, then turned. If you need help with the fire door, call me. Paid work, written down. I'll think about it. That was all either of them could offer without lying. On day 78, the new operator door closed properly for the first time. The latch caught, the seal met the frame, and the upstairs rooms disappeared from the public hall. Elijah opened and closed it 3 more times. Morgan checked the gap with a gauge. Pass, she said. The word gave him more relief than the bell had. The bell proved what Jack built. The door proved Elijah could preserve it without surrendering his home. On day 84, the handrail passed inspection. On day 86, Morgan approved the emergency procedure. The waiting room alarms, exit hardware, and platform lights all passed their functional checks. One problem remained. The control cabinet's protective inner cover had been fabricated to Caleb's measurements, but one mounting hole didn't align. Forcing it would place pressure near a relay bracket. Elijah stopped the installation. Morgan looked at the calendar. 4 days. I know. We can request a short extension. The lease says 90. It also allows review for a documented supply problem. That isn't the point. What is? That cover protects the system. I'm not putting it in wrong so the paperwork looks finished. Morgan studied him, then nodded. They removed the cover and carried it to Elijah's workbench. Brianna held the light. Lily read the measurements. James arrived with a drill press he hadn't yet sold from the shop. Nobody touched the cabinet. They worked on the cover instead. James set the drill press on Elijah's workbench and checked the belt tension. This table level? He asked. Close. Close isn't level. Elijah handed him 2 metal shims. They supported the protective cover on wood blocks. Morgan marked the correct hole location from Caleb's measurements. Lily checked the distance twice. Brianna held a vacuum hose near the drill bit to catch the metal filings. James lowered the bit slowly. The new hole came through clean. Elijah removed the sharp edge with a hand tool, cleaned the cover, and inspected both sides beneath a bright lamp. No filings, he said. Morgan ran a white cloth over the surface. It came away clean. They carried the cover back to the utility room. Only Elijah and Morgan crossed the restricted line. James remained in the operator hall. Elijah positioned the cover without touching the relay bracket. The bolts entered by hand. He tightened them in sequence, checked the clearance, and closed the outer cabinet door. Morgan tested the protective interlock. Pass, she said. Lily wrote the result in the access book. Brianna packed the cleaning supplies. James loaded the drill press into his van. Nobody celebrated. It was late, and the final inspection was still ahead. At the rear door, James stopped beside Elijah. You didn't need me to do that, he said. I needed the drill press. James gave a short nod. It was a small correction, but an important one. Being needed for one task did not give him control over everything around it. Invoice is on the bench, he said. Elijah paid it the next morning. On day 90, Morgan began the final inspection before sunrise. She tested the emergency key box, alarms, platform lights, operator door, handrail, and cabinet covers. Elijah performed the shutdown procedure without looking at his notes. He recorded the simulated fault, secured the fuse, and notified the cooperative by radio. Morgan checked her watch. "Within procedure time," she said. They moved upstairs. She opened the fire door, inspected the seal, and confirmed that the apartment lock remained separate from the operator access system. She didn't enter the bedroom. The lease gave the cooperative no reason to be there. Back in the waiting hall, she signed the compliance page. 90 days, she said. Exactly. You could have requested the extension. I didn't need it. Morgan closed the binder. Now you get to discover that operating is harder than preparing. She placed the final lease on the ticket counter. Elijah had already reviewed it. The station remained his. The cooperative leased the control point, platform access, and public waiting hall for $3,200 each month. The operator's rooms and workshop remained private except during a genuine emergency. He signed. Morgan signed for the cooperative. The first payment arrived 3 business days later. Elijah stared at the bank entry long enough for the screen to dim. Then he paid the insurance balance, replaced the money used for the engineer, and ordered the final canopy materials. He didn't buy a car or move into an apartment. He bought what the station needed next. The route didn't open immediately. For several months, Morgan trained operators, tested the inspection car, and coordinated repairs along the West Block. Elijah checked the controller at scheduled intervals and recorded every reading. When a summer storm flooded the platform housing, the block showed a fault exactly as it should. Morgan called just after midnight. "Control point reports unsafe," she said. "I see it. Can you inspect the housing?" Elijah was already pulling on his boots. He went through the operator hall without entering the public waiting room. Rain struck the platform canopy. Water had risen around the outdoor housing, but the seal held. A fallen branch had pulled one track lead loose farther west. Elijah didn't reconnect it alone. He secured the area, confirmed the safe state, and waited for Morgan. They repaired the lead at first light. The circuit returned. The bell remained quiet because no vehicle occupied the block. That was the first test of the new pattern. The system failed safely. Elijah followed procedure, and the route lost a morning of testing instead of pretending nothing was wrong. The second test came through the front door. Brianna was painting the waiting room trim when a man in office clothes entered and asked whether the owner would consider selling the river frontage. She set down her brush. "Elijah owns the whole station parcel," she said. "I don't represent it." The man offered her a card. She didn't take it. "If he wants to speak with you, he will." Elijah had heard from behind the ticket counter. He waited until the man left. "You could have given me the card," he said. "I could have. Why didn't you?" "You already answered that question." She returned to painting. Later, she asked permission before carrying supplies into the operator hall. Elijah said no because a control check was underway. "All right," she said, and used the public entrance. Her disappointment didn't become an argument. That mattered more than another apology. James began taking smaller repair jobs from his garage. He no longer carried payroll or a shop lease, and some weeks were thin. Elijah referred customers whose work fit James's license and schedule. He didn't lend him lease money. When James performed a repair at the station, he submitted a written estimate like anyone else. He signed the access book, used the assigned door, and left the controller alone. One afternoon, he replaced a failed workshop outlet. After finishing, he stood at the bottom of the apartment stairs. "Coffee?" Elijah asked. James looked up. "Am I allowed?" "Upstairs, yes." "Not because you worked here." They drank coffee at the small kitchen table in the restored operator's room. James noticed Jack's old electric kettle on the counter. "Brianna took that from the house," he said. "She brought it here. It always leaked near the handle. I replaced the seal." James nodded. They spoke about the weather, 2 customers they both knew, and the rising cost of wire. They didn't speak about the porch. They had spoken about it once, and Elijah didn't need to reopen the wound each time his father entered a room correctly. When James left, he asked whether he should lock the operator door. "Yes," Elijah said. James did. Lily helped prepare the waiting hall for reopening. She filled the timetable frame with a printed schedule and corrected Morgan's punctuation with a pen. "You can't write on the public copy," Morgan said. "I already did. It has to be reprinted now. Then it'll be right." They placed Jack's maintenance log in a protected display case near the ticket counter. Only one page was shown, an ordinary record of a winter continuity check. The entries needed no dramatic explanation. They showed that someone had kept returning when there were no passengers to notice. The original log remained secured when the station was closed. Elijah mounted Jack's tool roll above the workshop bench. The old meter stayed on a shelf with a label, saying it was no longer approved for live work. Useful history didn't have to be used carelessly. The Huron Loop reopened on a clear Saturday morning. Morgan brought the first Heritage car along the west block at walking speed. The station controller registered its entry, and the platform signal changed as designed. The night selector remained off. The bell did not ring. Adults with cameras gathered behind the handrail. Former route workers stood near Lily and compared memories. Neighbors who had watched Elijah repair the station one window at a time entered through the front doors and sat on the old benches. The waiting hall smelled of coffee, fresh paint, and warm dust from the radiators. Elijah worked at the ticket counter with the access book open beside him. He answered questions about departure times, directed people away from the operator hall, and checked the control indicator between conversations. Nobody asked why he was there. His role was visible in what he did. Brianna volunteered at the public entrance. She wore a cooperative badge with no property title beneath her name. When people praised the restoration, she pointed toward Elijah or Morgan instead of explaining her connection first. James arrived shortly before the first departure. He signed the visitor book, even though the front doors were open. "You don't have to sign that one," Elijah told him. "I know." James stood near the platform rail while the Heritage car loaded. He didn't tell anyone Jack's name belonged to his business. He watched Elijah confirm the block, speak with Morgan by radio, and clear the car for departure. As the car moved west, James placed one hand on the repaired rail. "Good work," he said. Elijah checked the signal before answering. "Thank you." That was enough for the morning. The station settled into use. Elijah repaired lamps and electrical controls in the workshop during weekdays. The cooperative operated on scheduled weekends. The waiting hall opened early on service days and closed after the final car cleared the block. Lease payments covered the building, but they didn't remove the work. Leaves still clogged the roof drain. The platform needed sweeping. A relay reading drifted in cold weather and had to be checked. Public doors collected fingerprints faster than Brianna believed possible. Morgan continued to inspect his records. She returned one monthly sheet because Elijah had written normal instead of recording the actual value. "You knew what I meant?" he said. "I did." "Then why return it?" "Because the person reading it 10 years from now won't." Elijah corrected the sheet. Lily took the dispatcher's chair during special events. She kept her padded folding chair beside it in case anyone tried to replace it with cold metal. On the first anniversary of the reopening, Elijah found James waiting outside the operator door with a paper bag of breakfast sandwiches. "I was already stopping," James said. Elijah looked at the bag, then at him. "That line didn't work the first time." "I know." James signed the access book and waited. Elijah opened the door. Their contact remained conditional. Brianna's did too. Neither received a key to the station. Neither made decisions about the route, the lease, or Elijah's apartment. They were welcomed when they respected the place and the person responsible for it. The night bell stayed above the control cabinet. It had rung once during the proof Jack designed. After that, it returned to its ordinary duty, ready but quiet unless the approved sequence required it. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. One winter evening, after the final Heritage car cleared the west block, Elijah closed the public doors and checked the rear lock. Morgan's radio call confirmed the route was secure. Lily had gone home with her chair. Brianna had cleaned the coffee counter and signed out. James had left a paid invoice beneath the workshop lamp. Elijah entered the final readings in the control log. Upstairs, the kettle clicked off in his kitchen. Warm light showed beneath the private fire door. His boots waited on the mat, and the old brass station key rested in his pocket. He walked through the empty hall, straightened one timetable that had slipped in its frame, and listened until the building settled around him. Elijah switched off the waiting hall lamps beneath the quiet bell, then climbed the restored stairs home.